Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Lakewood City Council study session agenda for this Monday, November 28th, 2022. And I sound very ominous with the sound. It seems very loud. Well, welcome tonight. We have a variety of interesting topics and agenda items. And the first is our joint youth council meeting. And if you want to lead us off.
All right. I'm a big fan of these microphones. I love how these sound. I sound like Darth Vader or something.
Exactly.
So good evening, Mayor Whalen, Deputy Mayor Moss, and the council. My name is Hank, and I am here with Brandon Elliott, and we are the co-chairs of the Youth Council. And we are here to present our accomplishments of the past year and our work plan for the remainder of this term. Brandon, go ahead.
All right, good evening. So last year was unique. It was unique in the sense that it was our first year coming out of the pandemic. It was unique in the sense that we had a lack of representation across the high schools, and it was unique in the sense that we got stuff done last year. Despite all of the unique circumstances, we were able to have our youth summit that focused on financial literacy, youth mental health, and workforce development. The event included guest speakers, a vendor expo, breakout sessions, and was well attended by Clover Park students, not only from high school, but 7th through 12th grade students. Coming out of last year, we had lots of conversations about what we wanted to do better. We wanted to increase the representation across different high schools, and we wanted to increase the amount of members that served on the council. And I'm happy to report that we were able to increase our numbers greatly, and we have 24 students from all high schools represented now serving on the council. And the 24 of us, we have some big goals for this year that Hank will share.
Yeah, so I'd love to share what we've done already in the current term and what we have planned for the remainder of this term. So we started off the year on August 26th. I'm sure you'll remember, Mayor Whalen. We were at the pavilion at Fort Silicon Park, and we had a great kickoff event. I love our group this year. We have really good chemistry. Like Brandon said, it's bigger than ever. It's a big family. And we had our first regular meeting in September. Just introductions, going over the purpose of the council and meeting expectations. And then in October, we really started ramping up by choosing our advisory board and commission youth council representatives. And that's still going strong. We have our members showing up to meetings regularly. We have, 3 or 4 members to each board. I'm going to the next Lakewood Thomas Advisory Board meeting on Thursday. I'm recruiting all of the other members who signed up, and we're all really excited about it. At our most recent meeting, we had discussions around sustainable solutions with the Pierce County Equity and Engagement representatives, and we also had conversations with the city social media team, or the communications manager for the city, about how youth council can get more involved with their social media efforts. We've been diligently planning details for our first youth council hosted roundtable discussion, which will be around homelessness. We've also had our set site for May, where we will be having our youth summit, and that will be held on May 27th. Our agenda this coming meeting in December, we're going to continue to iron out details about our roundtables and other events we have planned throughout the year. And we're also going to be getting everyone in line, prepping our volunteers for the Christmas parade on December 10th.
Great.
Yeah. And like I said, on the 9th of this coming month, we'll be hosting our first roundtable discussion on homelessness in Lakewood at Harrison Prep. We plan on hosting more events throughout the year, promoting dialogue of issues that Lakewood students hold close to heart. We also have our set site on the spring, where we will again be hosting the Youth Summit with an emphasis on fostering student leadership and leadership development.
And with that being said, are there any questions?
Before we open to questions, let's introduce your other members present.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
And the other member we have with us is our loyal communications manager, Angel.
Come on up, Angel. Grab a chair or whatever there. Yeah, there's a chair right there.
Hi, my name is Angel. Nice to meet you guys.
Nice to see you. Yeah, thanks for coming. Grab a chair and you can sit up with Hank and Brandon there. Mr.
Plenty of room.
Boki.
Plenty of room.
I just wanted to ask a quick question about the roundtable that you have about
Yeah.
homelessness, youth homelessness. Who's gonna be at that? Have you asked folks from the school district to come? Because I know they have a pretty robust homelessness group.
Yeah, well, we were actually having a conversation with Councilmember Brandstetter right before this meeting kicked off. The goal of this roundtable isn't so much to come away with like a bulleted list of solutions or really any actionable items. That's not the goal we have in mind, although we do anticipate that possibility and we expect that people are going to walk away with solutions in their head that they want to put into action. But it's really about conversation for conversation's sake and getting everyone more enlightened through dialogue on an issue that everyone cares deeply about, an issue that deeply affects our community. And so, yeah, we're inviting students and it's really for students, but with that being said, we will definitely be recording our answers, recording the things that we say, the consensuses that we build, and we will be sharing that information with relevant stakeholders like the City of Lakewood, like the Clover Park School District, and other community organizations. Brandon, do you want to add on to that? Okay. Yeah. Hope that answers your question.
Deputy Mayor Moss.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, thank you guys for the report. I'm really happy to hear that all the schools are participating this time. And I just want
Us
to
too.
know, what did you do different to get them involved?
So to get our recruitment up, we just had to go straight to the source. Like we started having flyers being shown in the school at the start of the year and extended our deadline past the following year, but to going into the school year. And we were able to get a lot of people that were passionate and ready about the new school years to engage in our youth council. Another thing I would say we did differently is we definitely there was a drive and passion from last year's youth council that came off of the youth summit that really motivated people to want to join and be involved, to not get more than just like a hoodie, but to just be a part of the stuff they got to see.
The hoodie helped.
The hoodies help, the
They're
hoodies help,
nice.
yeah.
They're quite nice. I didn't get one, but.
I didn't either, so, just
Yeah.
in case. But
Um,
thank you guys so much. But you-
Yeah, and I want to add on to that. We have definitely gotten a lot better at advertising the youth council. I think that's a point of pride for both Brandon and I, who have been hustling every summer trying to get new recruits in. But I think the most effective way we've been advertising is really inadvertent word of mouth. I think people see us out there in our green hoodies everywhere, or they were blue hoodies last year, but at events like Truck and Tractor Day, at Lakewood's 25th anniversary event. That was my favorite event that Lakewood has ever hosted that I've been a part of. I still have a lot of fun memories of that day. And the Christmas parade on the 10th, we'll be out there waving. I remember I was dressed up in a Sully costume one year. I didn't appreciate that very much, but usually it's pretty fun. And I think people really see how much fun we're having, and people are seeing the impact that we make. And they are attracted to it. They want to be a part of it.
Yeah.
And I think that's what we're doing right, and that's what we want to continue doing.
Fantastic.
Keep
You've
on
done a
good
great
numbers.
job. I'm
That's
happy to
great.
hear that. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
So what can we do to help with the planning or participation in the event for the summit coming up? I know you'll have more to follow on that, but any sort of thoughts in advance?
I would say that at any of our events that we're hosting, city council like presence is definitely something that would go a long way. Like, so just being there and being present is what we ask.
Great, okay. Very good, Mr. Brandstetter.
Yeah, I guess I wanted to ask Angel, this is the first year that there's definitively been a communications manager for the youth council. So what do you do and what have you learned?
Sorry, what was that?
What really do you do as a communications manager, and is it teaching you anything?
Well, I'm looking forward to work with our new communications manager. We still have a lot to talk about, but I'm excited to see if we can be a part of the Lakewood's Instagram account and like just to show the community that we're out here too doing stuff to show them that we're also here.
Okay, well, I think that's a challenge for everyone who's in the public realm to try to communicate what's going on and have a way to both send and receive information from the communities that you're trying to serve, with whatever those audiences are. So thanks for taking that on.
And the deputy mayor wanted to task you with putting together a funny but tasteful TikTok thing that we could be participating in.
Interesting.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
that's your challenge. But these guys know.
Yeah,
Okay.
that'll be fun.
She talks the lingo. I have no idea
Well,
what that means, but
I don't know,
but that would be kind of,
Yeah.
that would be kind of
We'd-
funny to
trying to be
do, to put
subversive.
something together. You
We'd
could
love
teach
to
us
work
how
on
to
it.
do it, and then that could be a good advertisement, if you will.
Yeah.
for the- Mr. Anderson, he knows what a TikTok reel is. He's got
No, it's a
18
Instagram
daughters
reel.
and grandchildren.
TikTok doesn't have real.
Yeah.
And I can assure you, don't have to have a good comedy writer because if we're in it, it's going to be funny.
Exactly.
Inadvertently, but it will be funny.
Exactly. Fair warning, my son-in-law works for a group that pulls down misinformation off Instagram, so make sure it's factual. That's right. All right, anything else, guys? It's great to see you.
Yeah.
Hank, did you get all these college applications in? They were due by Thanksgiving.
What was that?
Did you get all those college applications in? They were due
Oh,
by
don't remind me,
Thanksgiving.
Mayor, please.
Oh, the essays coming.
We got in our UW applications, our UW applications.
We did do that,
Yes.
yeah.
Good.
We have a big list of schools we're getting into or applying to by January.
Well, it'll be a big list you're getting into as well, I'm sure.
Yes,
That's great.
fingers crossed. We'll
Very
update
exciting.
you
Well, keep us in the
in the
loop on that
spring.
too, because we
Yeah.
want to celebrate successes. I mean, that's the neat thing about what you guys get to do is come and share your lives a little bit with us and do some good work certainly for the city. But thank you.
Yeah,
course.
thank you
Thank
for the
you.
opportunity.
Yeah, you bet. All right. Next, we have a Sound Transit Access Improvement Project update. And I think we're having Zachary Eskanzai, the project manager, with us either on Zoom or in person, I think on Zoom. There he is. Zach, how are you?
Good evening, council members. How are y'all doing tonight?
We're doing great.
Good. Thank you for accommodating us virtually.
Absolutely.
All right, I have a brief presentation for you all. Let me just share my screen, and then I'm happy to take any questions. So again, I'm Zach Eskenazi with Sound Transit. I'm a senior project manager on the Lakewood Station Access Improvement Project. And with me here tonight is Katie Drool. She's our Government and Community Relations Officer at Sound Transit. All right, can you folks see my screen?
Yes,
Oh, great.
we can.
Let me from the beginning. Okay. So again, this is the Lakewood Station Access Improvement Project update to the Lakewood City Council. Just as a reminder to folks, this project will improve access to the Lakewood Sounder Station for those who are walking, biking, rolling, driving, or taking transit. This project is supportive of current and future planning efforts in Lakewood. And we've been working closely with city staff to advance the design of potential access improvements to the station that we identified and evaluated last year during the first phase of this project. We did come to the council earlier this year to present to you on those improvements. And again, the target delivery date for this project is 2030. So we worked to identify a set of improvements shown here on this map. The dark blue lines are what we're calling priority 1 improvements, and then the light blue lines are what we're calling priority 2. So we're currently in the phase of the project where we're doing some additional design and engineering work, and then we'll do an environmental review of the improvements. And then in early 2024, the board of directors will select a set of improvements to construct. We've also been in conversations with city staff, and there is some interest in the city delivering some of these proposed improvements that would be located in the city right-of-way. Those improvements are listed here on the screen. So for the priority 1 improvements to be delivered by the city of Lakewood, those would be improvements on 112th Street Southwest, which includes sidewalks and bicycle lanes. Bridgeport, what we're calling Bridgeport Way connections via 115th Street Southwest. So that's the street here. So doing some sidewalk improvements here, and then creating a trail to connect to the pedestrian bridge that would get you over the tracks to the station. Kendrick Street Southwest connections. So again, sidewalks, missing sidewalks, curb ramps on Kendrick's here. Clover Creek Drive improvements, as well as sidewalks on 47th Avenue. And then priority 2 projects that could be delivered by the city of Lakewood would be Davison Road, Southwest connections. So again, sidewalks, bike lanes. And then also what we're calling Clover Park High School connection here. In the Springbrook area, sidewalk and bicycle connections. These are priority 1 and 2 projects. So then Sound Transit would deliver improvements outside of the city right of way, which would include stationary improvements, wayfinding from Kendrick, a portion of that Bridgeport Way project, the trail, as well as sidewalks on the 47th Avenue Street bridge that cross over I-5. So we are launching an online open house to gather community input on the proposed improvements. And that's part of the reason we're here tonight is just we wanted to give you all an update that we'll be going out to talk about these improvements and get feedback from the community on this early design work that we've been doing and asking them to fill out a survey to let us know their opinions about the types of improvements that we're developing. So that online open house will be available on December 8th and running till January 5th. We do realize this is kind of falling within the holidays. So we typically do just a few 3 weeks. So we're adding an extra week on to the online open house so that folks have more time given the holidays. We'll also be out in the community too this month, or in December. We're not quite there yet to December. Wednesday, the 14th, we'll be at the Nourish Pierce County Mobile Food Bank. On Thursday, we'll be at the Lakewood Library pop-up at City Hall. And then on Saturday, we'll be in the Springbrook neighborhood attending the Springbrook Connection holiday giveaway. So we'll be out and about talking about the project to folks in this next month. And just as a reminder, this is the high-level project timeline. As I mentioned earlier, we're currently in the planning phase, and we plan on taking a set of improvements to have the board of directors select a project to be built in early 2024. We would then move into final design and construction. So in addition to the conceptual engineering and environmental review that we're conducting currently, we're also in conversations with city staff on developing a framework for the city to deliver those improvements that we identified in city right-of-way. So also in 2023, we hope to have some sort of draft agreement in place that we would then take to our board and also to you on the council for approval. And that would likely happen in 2024. Also, as part of that agreement, we would come to some understanding of how the city would deliver these improvements from 2024 onwards, understanding that they will have to be spread out, as that's a lot of work for the city to take on. As you noticed, it's a lot of improvements, so we'll have to be thoughtful in how we structure the delivery of those improvements. So that's where we are. We hope to complete this project by 2030, if not earlier, but 2030 is our date. And that concludes my presentation. And I'd be happy to take any questions.
Well, thank you, Zach. I think your last sentence was of intrigue to me, if not earlier. So what would be the opportunity or the decision point, if any, that would perhaps bring the improvements to the city earlier than 2030?
That's a good question. So that if let's say there was like an opportunity for the city to bring matching funds or leverage resources to make a project more deliverable faster, for example, that could be something we could do that could speed up that timeline.
Got it. Okay, very good. And I'm sure as you go along in the planning process, the notion of what matching funds could be or perhaps should be will be communicated.
Correct. Mm-hmm.
But right now, is there an expectation on this particular list of projects that the city put in a matching fund? I don't believe there is.
No, there is not. No. Mm-mm.
So if we were to come up with some other funds through TIB or
Correct. Yes.
PSRC, okay.
Yeah.
Any other questions, folks? Mr. Branstetter?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Zach, on your timeline slide, that where it sort of showed 2025 to 2030, as construction, that does that window include both the priority 1 and priority 2 projects as you describe them?
Good question. So my hope is that, or I believe the way this is going to go, once we finish this phase of the project and the board selects a set of improvements to be built, we will no longer have priority 1 and 2. The hope is that we'll do a cost estimate and we'll get a better understanding of how much all this is going to cost. If there's room in that amount to bring forward priority 2 projects, we will work with city staff and the community to identify priority 2 projects. Then we will hope to have a whole set of improvements, and that would be what the board would select. So by that point, we would have a set of improvements that we're going to build, and we wouldn't really prioritize them any longer in that way.
So I guess then, what is the metrics that would determine exactly how many of the sub-projects that were shown that the board will actually have the wherewithal to approve?
Good question. So we've identified a total of $47 million for this project, and we can't go beyond that. And so we're pretty certain we could do the priority 1 set of improvements, and then it'll be between we have some goals and criteria that we set in the first phase of the project, and things like proximity to the station, is it creating connections to underserved communities, are kind of the higher priorities. And so we would probably revisit that criteria as we decide which of the priority 2 improvements we should bring forward as a recommendation.
It looked like on the map that some of the priority 1 improvements were along stretches of right of way of the city where there is going to be private development of adjacent properties that has generally provided some funding for a portion of work in the right of way that fronts them,
Right.
such as on 47th or on Kendrick, and even on 115th, I think. But that, so I guess that it would be helpful if we got to a point before those projects were fully permitted, if you had some thoughts about what should maybe be asked of developers for both the commercial properties, perhaps on 47th, and some residential developments along Kendrick and others. It's kind of a view and we, our city staff are together with knowing what's needed, and in fact, people who are going to develop know what's planned, that there may be some of that supplemental funding that deals with pieces of what would be needed there.
Yeah, good question, good point. We are working closely with Paul and his staff and with Tiffany. So we do have some awareness of what those developments are, and we do know, for example, on 47th about that potential future development. So we are proposing, for example, frontage improvements on that block of 47th. But we'll continue to work with city staff to make sure that we're leveraging those opportunities with developers, so that we're prioritizing these dollars where they're really needed.
I say the timing of development may create some efficiencies in terms of the timing of your project schedule.
Correct. Yeah.
They can be combined. Okay.
Definitely. Good point.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Mayor.
Thank you.
Mr. Anderson.
Thank you. Yeah, I don't mean to threaten anybody's job, but Lakewood's got a pretty lean, mean public works department. We have managed to build a bridge improvement project for WashDOT with federal money, most of which was outside the city of Lakewood. So it can be pretty innovative. So going to be an opportunity, if it makes sense fiscally, to once the Sound Transit Board has approved the perhaps dollar figure in projects, to have it managed locally. They are our streets.
Yeah, we're definitely excited about that opportunity and agree. We do see the possibility for efficiencies there.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Zach, I had a quick question. Maybe it's one for the city manager as well. Looking at the map, the improvements down 112th, those go by Clover Park, right?
I believe so, yes.
Yeah. And that was my question. We're already doing a portion of that, aren't we, as the city?
That's correct, Mayor Whalen. There's a portion from Gravelly Lake, there's a portion of 112 from Gravelly Lake Drive up to, I don't know what the cross street is off the top of my head, where we're doing curbs, gutters, and sidewalks with a Safe Routes to School grant. And I believe it's under design. I believe we construct either in 23 or 24.
I throw that out there because that's an example of a project where the city is putting in money already, and just throwing it out there, if that project could be accelerated to get completed all the way from Gravelly to Bridgeport on 112th, given that the city's doing a big chunk of it, that would be fabulous for the students that walk to school on that street. So.
Great. Good to know.
Okay. Any other questions? We really appreciate the partnership with Sound Transit. We are very appreciative and excited about the level of investment in Lakewood community. especially in those areas that have, populations that deserve those services because they have not had the opportunity for that connectivity, especially to transit. So your investment in our community is, of great need and much appreciated. So thank you for your work tonight.
Great, thank you. And thank you all for your partnership as well. We're excited about this project and this opportunity. And we encourage you all, we'll send the survey around to city staff to get it out to you folks as well. So we encourage you all to check out that online open house too. There's a lot more detail on these proposed improvements.
Great, well, appreciate it.
All right, well, thank you folks. Have a great evening.
You bet.
Thank you.
Next, we turn to a review of the revised Bristol apartment multifamily tax exemption request. And I believe for this, we have our economic development manager, Becky Newton. Starts on page 5 of our packet tonight, folks, if you want to take a look at that. We have one little tiny office, 349 square feet in the main floor. 7 units.
Good evening, Mayor Whalen, Deputy Mayor Moss, and members of council. This is a second time you've seen this presentation, and that is because there were two changes to the proposal. One is there's a new owner for the project, and the other is instead of 100% affordable in the agreement, it's been changed to 20% minimum affordable, and that's to allow more flexibility to keep the property full for the entirety. So your packet includes the project application, site plan, draft resolution, the draft conditional certificate, as well as the draft agreement for the RTA. So CED staff has completed a design review for the new Bristol Apartments proposal at 9615 Bristol Avenue. The proposed project is in substantial compliance with the community's design and development standards outlined in section 18A 60040 of the Lakewood Land Use and Development Code, as well as Title 18B, the Downtown Development Code. The applicant will construct street improvements as well as landscaping along Bristol. It's a 3-story mixed-use building with commercial unit on the ground floor and 7 residential units. The site is in the CBD RTA, located on a mixed-use street per the regulating plan map. And this is outlined in LMC 18B 121. It's a 12-year exemption in order to allow for affordable units. It requires a 20% minimum, as mentioned, for low to moderate income individuals and families. The applicant will be setting aside 20% minimum units for that low to middle income, which means, for example, a single person, family, or unrelated person living together whose adjusted income at or below 80% of the median family income, as adjusted for family size. A family of 4, the income could be up to $81,200. For moderate income, median family income may be up to $101,800, regardless of the number of persons in the household. It has 7 one-bedroom units with office, garage parking for an additional cost, and private balconies. And it is our first mixed-use project in the downtown. This is just a layout of what the first floor as well as the second and third floor look like. These are elevations showing each side of the apartment and what they look like from the exterior. This calculation is estimated for the exemption. The orange line represents the revenue with the tax exemption, while the blue line is without. If you notice, year 2 increases, and this is due to permitting fees. Year 4 to 15, estimated tax exemption period on the new residential units. And beginning to 2025, fees assumed to be based on full 7-unit occupancy. This revenue chart shows year 1 to 3, showing the costs during the project development. Revenue with and without the project shows the total revenue. Column 3 shows the total estimated revenue without the project. And post-exemption shows 2 years following tax exemption period revenue with and without the project. And this final chart, the Lakewood revenue chart, shows vacant land tax and improved or completed project tax value, including post-exemption period. The third column shows exempted from collection by Lakewood, and the fourth column, rough average of all other taxing districts. The city council review and comment for this evening, based on council direction, make any amendments as needed. And residential resolution, conditional certificate, and so forth is set for adoption on December 5th. And that concludes my presentation.
Very good. Any questions of Ms. Newton? Mr. Anderson?
I didn't say it. Do you have a plat map?
Do I have a plat map?
You know where it's located?
Well, showing how the building sits on the property, how much space there is, if there's any open space, if there are any trees, if there's any parking.
Sure.
Site plan.
There's just a basic layout of the building included in the packet. It does.
Right by it, I guess.
There's a very basic one on 43. It looks like
19.
too.
Open space, due to the size of the property, in lieu of open space, there's a payment that will be made.
Got it.
I do not know, but I can find out.
That would be nice to see the street frontage.
You're correct. The requesting is really not within the documents per se. It's just the site itself. I suspect you're wanting to take a look at the surrounding properties as well. We can provide that as a part of your materials on the 5th. As I recall, this is a vacant lot. It's very small. It's postage stamp. It's right behind an existing banking facility and a few other things.
Yeah, it's 6,100 square foot. Site, 6,119 square feet on the site itself.
Let's say,
Yeah, 0.14 acres.
say Graham area residential lot.
Yeah. Mr. Buer, while you're up there, I had a question that might lead to some others. High level education is our first mixed use in the CBD. We did all sorts of work on design standards. Ms. Newton recited that it complies with the design standards, but just looking at the elevation drawings, can you just educate us briefly on what this has that does comply with the new design standards in the CBD? Because it looks like most of the other apartments in town.
I don't want to hazard a guess this evening. We can go through and provide that information at your next meeting. I think that would be better than me trying to ad lib, frankly.
Got it. Okay. Usually you're pretty good at tap dancing, Mr. Buer. Mr. Branstetter.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's got 7 units in an office. How did the calculations of the required number of parking spaces come out to 11?
I'd have to.
The short answer is that that was what is requirement under the 18B regulations, where the city approved a lesser standard for parking. Again, we can provide how that was calculated at your next meeting.
So out of the 11 spaces, how many are for the residential and how many are for that office that's going to be a business?
I cannot give you that answer this evening, Mr. Branstad.
Mr. Branstad, I do have a little bit of information on the parking here under 18B 600, 610, required 2 spaces per 1,000 square feet of building space, and the office unit is 329 square feet. So we determined they would need 2 spaces for the office and 7 spaces for the residential units. There's no street parking set aside for this proposal and no SEPA required.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, Andrea Bell, Associate Planner, is available online. She's worked on the specifics of this project. I think she could answer many of our questions.
Fabulous. If she's willing, that'd be great.
Ms.
Love
Bell,
this
it's all
stuff.
yours.
Welcome.
Hi, thank you for having me. So I primarily did work on this project, and I did draft the design review. I'm happy to try and answer as many questions as you have to the best of my ability. If there's anything we need to follow up on, I can definitely provide that information in greater detail to Becky for the next council session.
I think the initial question I had, Ms. Bell, was just high level. Have to get to the weeds, but when we adopted the sub-area plan for the central business district, we had certain design standards, and I was just curious what played into this review with regard to those design standards, since it is our first mixed use. I was of the impression that we had to have 16 feet of glazing on the first floor of any mixed use project.
Yeah, so there was a number of items that we looked at in terms of district-wide development standards that, included things as simple as density and lot size, as well as lot coverage, into building height, specific design, tree preservation, landscaping, first floor minimum height, weather protection, so on and so forth. As we went through these different development standards and code citations, and given the fact that this was our first mixed use element that we've seen in the downtown like this, and that they were providing the first like commercial type unit mixed with the residential, there are a few things that we looked at that we were saying, I'm trying to find the exact right wording for this. 16 feet is the first floor minimum height requirement. This requirement is slightly deficient by approximately 2 feet. And it had to do with the way that they were trying to create the colonial design for this project. Based on some of the other elements that they provided in terms of design, we felt that it was appropriate that in terms of such a small deviation that we could come up with reason for approval. Other than that, some of the other elements we looked at in terms of building height, weather protection, building maximum setback from right of way, front entrance for commercial space, and things of that nature, those were all met. So given the 2 foot deficit for that first floor minimum height, we were able to determine that they were meeting substantial compliance. And based on the design review, that was the only thing that was slightly deficient.
Got it. That was the one thing that did catch my eye. So thank you for that.
Yeah.
Any other question? How about the parking question that maybe it's been addressed, but Ms.
Yes.
Newton suggested that the allocation was 2 for the commercial unit and then 1 per residential unit plus some ancillary parking for, yes, is that correct?
Yeah, that is correct. So it is 1 per residential unit and 2 for the commercial unit. And then they were required to have at least 5% of their total parking be ADA accessible. So they were meeting their parking standards here.
Great.
And I can also answer the question about the open space that I heard earlier, if you'd like.
Absolutely, thank you.
So, in 18B for the downtown, there is a provision, it is 18B.500.530, and this has to do with site restrictions when you're dealing with open space, since a lot of the land in the downtown, some of it is fairly restrictive in terms of size. And so we were able to establish that they would not be able to meet the open space criteria, which would be 100 square feet of common open space per unit. And given the fact that they aren't able to do that, their design review does require them to pay a fee in lieu for the portion of open space that they are not able to provide. This also includes things such as private open spaces. So for instance, if you had any units on the first floor and there weren't patios or private open spaces provided, that would come into account as well. And so the way that this works is the payment needs to be collected within 5 years of the project being built. And what will happen is that that has to be based on, oh my gosh, what's it called? An appraisal of what that fair market value of that land otherwise required to be provided would be. So that would be a condition of their project. And in addition to that, they also have a trip mitigation fee that they would be required to pay because they are located in that downtown. And we currently have that fee at approximately $5,477.72.
Got it. Didn't round up. Mr. Boki.
So 7 units, 20%. Unless we round up, we get 2 units of low-income housing. Is that how it works?
I believe so. I would probably defer back to Becky and Dave on that.
Technically 1.4, but they will be doing two units, correct?
Okay. Okay, thanks.
Any other questions? You know, it's the first one. It's kind of neat to be able to have even a small office space there because we just went through a significant investment in the Business Accelerator project, and this is kind of in that space for a single individual owner, perhaps to have a fairly modest overhead for a commercial office space, whether they're they could be any number of things in a professional office space, but that's a neat opportunity in that area to have one, I think. Did you have a question or point? Yes, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just curious, do we know what the lower part will consist of? Who will be moving in?
Not at this time, Deputy Mayor Moss. We don't know.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
To recruit.
Be the new location for
So,
your organization, for instance. Yeah. Mr. Anderson.
This, in a nutshell, means that the developer gains a $300,000 tax advantage for producing 2 one-bedroom units or limiting them for a limited period of time to low-income people, which doesn't sound like that great a deal, but there are 2 mitigating factors. One is that it may be the tipping point as to whether it's developed at all, so we aren't getting any money out of it now. Or the public isn't, most of it would go to the school district and others. The other one is if you look at affordable housing costs and all the ARPA proposals, ours and others, it's hundreds of thousands of dollars, in Southern California, they're up to well over $500,000 per affordable unit of government money.
Mm-hmm.
So this is nothing out of pocket. It's giving up money that we aren't collecting now. And so if it could, it's such a small element of development that it's probably a good experiment. The thing ironically I'm probably most concerned about is I don't see any trees there. And it seems a little bit hypocritical to have gone through this whole tree preservation and then talk about, we need tree equity, you need to have trees where low-income people live. So we create low-income housing without trees. Now, the density is the thing that drives low-income people to places that don't have trees. But still, I'm really uncomfortable not having some tree requirement, put that 100 square foot in and tree in.
Mr. Anderson, a landscaping plan will be required with this project. It's not been submitted yet, but there will be the requirement for landscaping. There will be a requirement for trees.
Ms. Bell, you had a hand up, I see.
Hi, yes, there was a landscaping requirement or landscaping plan requirement that was part of the design review draft approval that we've done. We have looked over that. There is tree planting that is required as part of the streetscape for this project. It is, granted it's not a very large streetscape that they have. It is relatively small, but they are required to plant trees every 20 feet on center. So that is included in their landscaping plan. Additionally, they have some landscaping requirements for the perimeter of the site. And there are also some trees that are included on the adjacent property. I believe it's to the east that are part of their landscape buffers that are required to be preserved as part of this project. And it is a vacant site. There's not very much there surrounding it, but we did require them to retain what exists and plant some additional trees.
Well, thank you for that. In some of the urban places we've seen around the South Sound, in these very sort of densified structures, people have done a wonderful job with large pots with plants in the pots and add some greenery or some aesthetic bling to the space where you won't otherwise have street trees available, right? So there's opportunities for that. Mr. Boking, did you? It's very small, so you have to do something creative like that, yeah. But it's a small lot that wouldn't otherwise be built, so. Well, thank you for the presentation. Thank you for appearing virtually, Ms. Bell. And thank you, Mr. Buer and Ms. Newton for that. Great. So we now turn to a review of the American Rescue Plan Act ARPA request for proposals. And I believe we have our long range and strategic planning manager, Ms. Spear, to lead us through this particular item.
Thank you and good evening, Mr. Mayor. I also have with me tonight Ted Thielen in the back here. He is the ARPA coordinator, so he's been assisting this with the ARPA program since it launched last year and continues to do so. So I'm appreciative of his efforts that went into tonight's presentation as well. So very quickly, in July, there was a conversation had by the City Council to establish this the idea of issuing 3 RFPs ultimately. One was for emergency food bank capital costs, one for veterans emergency shelter capital costs, and one for permanently low-income housing capital costs. In mid-September, the council discussed this again. They reviewed a draft version of each of the RFPs and then set the limit for the total to go to all 3 of these at $5 million. When we received the applications or the responses, the total in those applications was 12.2 million. And if you'll recall as well, there is actually an additional balance being set aside for some as yet identified purpose in the remaining balance of the city's ARPA funds. So we did receive 5 submittals total, 2 for the emergency food bank project, 2 for veterans emergency shelter, and 1 for permanently low-income housing capital costs. When Mr. Thielen and myself did the review that you'll see tonight in summary, it was really a qualitative review. It wasn't quantitative. And so it's just to highlight if there's any pauses or red flags to throw, but we don't have any specific recommendations. We did do risk assessments as required by ARPA. We both went through the SAM.gov system and also the city's own suspension and debarment requirements. And none of the applicants had any red flags in that system, either SAM.gov or the city's process. So to begin, the 2 that came from Emergency food banks, just to remind everyone, this is project or program funding for acquiring property and then capital construction or expansion of food bank services within the city of Lakewood. The first application to go through would be for the Emergency Food Network. They requested 1.5 million out of the total cost of a $6.3 million project. This is for a new, it would be their second 20,000 square foot warehouse on its Lakewood campus in Monte Vista. And it would increase their storage on site by 40%. They're currently using offsite storage in other areas of Pierce County and also up in Auburn. They do have significant funding already secured, 3.37 million, and then they have other sources pending. They've submitted the applications but haven't heard back yet. And then when we did our qualitative review, looking at planning and strategic concerns, transformative, scale and management, collaborative, equity, and whether it was responsive to the city's RFP, this one met all of those requirements or guidance. And so we would recommend this as all green. Just checking if there's any questions on that one before I keep going. Okay. Nourish Pierce County was also an application for the emergency food bank construction. Their request is for 2 million out of a $5 million project. And this is to actually purchase and renovate a new location for its food bank. Sue Potter, the executive director, I believe, testified last week during public comment on this project. And I believe there was also written comments submitted to council today about this, gave a little more detail. But as you can see in the chart below, there's a $5 million identified as the total, and there have been other sources of funding identified to work with the 2 million that's been requested through Lakewood's ARPA program. This one, again, all green other than the collaborative. And the only reason it's yellow here is because there were no partners. So how collaborative is it other than partnering with the city? Certainly, we've been long-term partners with Nourish Pierce County, but that was the only reason why that wasn't green as well. Moving to the Veterans Emergency Shelter. Again, we had 2 applications here, but this was capital cost to provide Veterans Emergency Shelter or transitional housing to be located near supportive service for veterans and also within Lakewood if possible. FOB Hope was one of the applicants, and they actually provided 2 options in their application. Option 1 was for 25 pallet homes. Option 2 is for 25 ice fishing shelters. And then the option 1 and 2 budgets are there at the bottom of the slide. You'll see option 1's a little higher. But the idea was to invest a certain amount in year 1 and then lesser amounts for the following years in either option. This one, a little more caution, if you will, just because this is an untried proposal or idea at all in the city. As you well know, this is a new thing for the council to be talking about. But in addition to that, FOB Hope did not have a location identified for this project. What they have done this year is partnered with the city of Tacoma, and they do have FOB Hope in Tacoma, where the city actually identified the location and then also assisted with bringing infrastructure to the site. So that is something that they were asking whether Lakewood would be willing and able to do. This organization has worked both with Pierce County and Tacoma. Neither jurisdiction had concerns. So it's really a matter of deciding if this is something that is a good fit within the city of Lakewood. The other application that came in was from Tacoma Rescue Mission. And this was not specifically for a veterans homeless shelter. This was in relation to Pierce County Village, which was originally called, I've just lost it. Thank you. Community First Village. Thank you. Sorry. But that the new name is Pierce County Village, as far as I know. The location is off of Spanaway Loop Road, and it is a homeless shelter in general. However, there have been some dedication, if you will, or commitment by the county as well as the, I believe, Tacoma Housing Authority to dedicate 25 housing vouchers, VASH vouchers to the project. So 25 microhomes for veterans would be set aside. The idea here, this is obviously a larger project than the funds from the Lakewood could pay for. This is about a $50 million project in all and as estimated, but these funds would be spent in phase 1, which would be complete prior to the end of the ARPA timeframe. So there were some funds, about 500,000 originally awarded by Pierce County for the analysis of this project. And since then, there are other sources of funding, Pierce County ARPA, as well as others, but to my knowledge, there have not been committed yet or approved yet by county council, in part because of some zoning and location questions that are ongoing. I certainly know that council members Anderson and Bouquet can speak to more detail about that. But the way you see it rated here is that it is within the CDBG plan as required by the RFP. It is transformative. This is a new type of project to come to Washington State. The scale and management, TRM is certainly a capable organization. They've proven themselves many times over, but this is something that is new again, and it is a large scale project. The red is there for the collaboration. And again, this is related to whether all of the other funding sources can be secured and operational dollars can be secured over time. And then whether it was responsive to the RFP, it is not specific to veterans and it is located outside of the city of Lakewood. The final one that came in was for permanently low-income housing construction. And the idea here was providing permanent affordable housing to individuals and families at 30 to 60% of Lakewood's area median household income. LASA, or Living Access Support Alliance, is the one that replied to this. They requested 3.5 million out of an 11.5 roughly $1 million project. This would be 25 permanently low-income housing units as part of their Gravelly Lake Commons project. So far with funding, they have received a pledge from the Pierce County ARPA funds of 3.5 million. They've submitted application to the Department of Commerce at the state. And as you'll see in the table below, they also have approached and have gotten support committed by the city of Lakewood already through state legislative and federal legislative action. So I just want to make a note here that if the ARPA funds were awarded in total or in full, and you were to couple that with a successful request at the federal and state level from Lakewood, there would actually be more funds awarded to them than the project is identifying as costing. So just a note for the council to be aware of. This one as a rating, the area that was not green was just the collaboration and whether or not the funds would ultimately come through from all of the various sources, but otherwise all green there as well. So with that, it's really up to the council tonight to take this conversation where you'd like to go. You've heard from some of the applicants since they submitted their RFP responses about what they hope to be able to do with the funds and why, but it's really up to the council to decide timeframe and scope of where you want to take this. I'll turn it back to you, Mr. Mayor.
So before I turn it over for questions, just remind us of the timelines by which the funds have to be both allocated and then spent.
Sure. The allocation or obligation of funds is done no later than December 31st of 2024. And then they have to be fully expended by December 31st of 2026.
Okay, that helps. 26, okay. Very good. So I'll open it up to questions to you first, and then we'll figure out a logical way to have kind of a round table discussion here on which ones we cull from the herd. So any questions of Ms. Spear before we begin the discussion? Mr. Anderson and then Mr. Branstetter.
Have any of these projects submitted a projected operating budget and any detail of the construction budget?
We received different levels of detail from them regarding construction. We didn't really get much regarding operating other than a statement from one or two that said they have that set up, but we don't have full detail from each of them.
Mr. Branstetter.
The proposal submitted by the rescue mission, which is in collaboration with others for the project in Spanaway, that is not intended to actually be a shelter, but is intended to be sort of permanent housing for chronically homeless folks. How would the evaluation of that application differ if we were to look at that application as one under the permanent supportive housing criteria that we wanted to support as opposed to a veteran shelter. Because it seems that it might be more, it's more of a permanent supportive housing model for the folks that they hope to do and then grow the site into more things than an actual shelter that was envisioned when we were putting together the thoughts for the RFP. They chose to submit as a veteran supported shelter under our thing over there. But if we were to evaluate their proposal under the permanent supportive housing, it still wouldn't be in Lakewood, but how is that?
It would really be up to the council to decide if that was a way you wanted to go. That the fact that the zoning of the project is at this point a matter of delay now. I don't know how long that will ultimately take to resolve. So whether you want to spend the money or commit the money and whether or not that could be spent by the end of the ARPA period is one question. You're right, Councilmember Branstetter, it would still be outside of the city of Lakewood. In terms of whether it fit permanent supportive housing, that's exactly what it's intended to be. The veterans portion of it, whether some or all of those would be Lakewood origin, if you will, I couldn't tell you. I think that the county at this point is looking for partners among all of the local governments to help this be a success. But other than that, there's not quite a lot of detail that I can give you this evening.
Thank you.
Any other questions of Ms. Spear before we begin? Ms. Farmer.
I was having trouble with the FOB application. I was curious. It looks like it's a capital request, but they talk about option 1 and option 2 as their budget. And I wasn't clear if that was a capital budget or if that was supposed to be their operating budget. I'm just reading it wrong.
I don't think you are, Councilmember Farmer. I think it's because they do explicitly state in their application that the funding that would be received through this project would help them keep their doors open. That's one statement that they explicitly said. They're a startup, if you will. They haven't been in the area for very long. It is run by a veteran, and she and her partner, that she's in California right now, the partner is up here to help operate the organization, are still trying to get their feet solidly on the ground and how this model will work. Having said all of that, I didn't hear anything negative from Tacoma or Pierce County with their experience with the organization.
Yeah, I've heard good things about Tacoma in particular. I was just concerned that if we were to fund this, where would the rest of the money come from? And it just seems to me that I would need more information to make a determination on this particular one. It's very intriguing though. So thank you.
And to piggyback on what I said before, there has not been any other funding identified yet, as far as I'm aware, for this project.
Right.
Thank you.
As we go through these, there's nothing that ties our hands to saying we have to commit $5 million of the 6.5-ish that we've got. We could hold some additional monies in reserve for an opportunity that may show itself for a shelter opportunity between now and 2024, correct?
And if I could as well, Mr. Mayor, the Pierce County right now has a NOFA open, a notice of funding availability open for non-congregate shelter. And so there may be a project that gets proposed through their process that would fit quite nicely with either the veterans or permanent supportive housing that we could partner with them on. And I'm tracking that closely with county staff.
Absolutely. Okay, so what I think we should do is I think we should go down each of the RFPs at a time and get kind of a sense from council about, I guess, 3 things. One is a kind of a thumbs up for that particular proposal, and then 2, at or below the amount requested, and or 3, any other conditions you'd want to place on the RFP proposal that we may adopt. So let's turn to the Emergency Food Network one. This is one where they've got $1.5 million requested. Certainly by the description, we all know EFN has been serving the Lakewood community in Greater Pierce County for a number of years. They do have significant committed funds, and they have a significant list of planned and pending funding that they've made a request for. Initially, as I recall, there was a request for 500,000, and that has jumped up to 1.5 in this particular RFP. So I throw it out there for your review and consideration. We'll go to the next, and then we can kind of, at the very end, sum up what we think we've heard collectively and give feedback to staff. So Mr. Anderson.
I think it has merit. I'd cap it at 500,000.
Ms. Farmer.
I was noticing that some of these folks have received county funds, and this one in particular received $750,000 from the county. And so I felt like these are our folks, and so we should fund them at a higher rate than the county. So I would propose maybe $1 million.
Okay, I'm gonna start doing my auction voice soon. Do I hear 5 or Ms. Bell?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. So do we know why you said it was?
I thought they came in initially, didn't they, at 500,000 at some point, and then we came out with the RFP formally? Or
I
maybe
honestly don't remember a $500,000
It
application.
may have been in conversations I had with the executive
Okay.
director where she was inquiring about a $500,000 house. That
Okay.
may be my recollection. Any other thoughts on EFN? So I've heard 500, I've heard $1 million. Mr. Branstetter.
That, like you, and I had a tour of EFN where there was a chance to look at the restrictions that the current warehouse had on their ability to expand their capacity to be able to go and do that. And whether it was their fundraising person or it was the executive director, 500,000 was a number that was stuck in my head about what they were doing. And this has been over a year ago. I think that the project is clearly and very definitively a capital project that has capacity outcomes that are understandable and defined. I think that it's located in Lakewood, but it's not clear from this whether how much of this increased capacity will actually improve food distribution in Lakewood. They are a regional entity to be able to go and do that. And we spent some of our ARPA funds on doing regional good. So it's the one thing that's unclear is how much local good this does. Well, albeit it's an established organization that has, I think, good capacity to run, and they certainly applied using our rules so that it meets the requirement of our application to do that. And I suspect that they will also have fundraising capacity so that if we don't give them 1.5, but we give them some lower number, they are not dead in the water.
Agreed. Mr. Bokey, did you have a point?
Well, I don't know if it's a point.
I guess we'll be the
Mayor
judge of that.
Whalen.
Yes, yeah.
But in, being an elected official, I'm going to agree with all three people who have already spoken
Perfect,
tonight.
yeah. Perfect.
And salute them for their well thought out and cogent comments. There have been some good things here. I think that it is a regional player. There's no doubt about that. So that's why I know the county looked at doing more.
Yeah.
But they stopped at that 750 number. I think in support of it, I would say they are doing exactly what we want people to do within the air corridor, right? Which is do warehouses and small businesses. So that it is a nice, nice, I mean, they already have the property and whatnot. I would say when you look on the second page there, and I do appreciate that they have other items out there that are in the 3.5 million range, which if you add that to the 3.3 would be 6.8, 6.9 million. I assume they would like to walk away from not putting in all their reserves. But so I'm in that range between the 500,000 and the million is what I'm saying. So I think, I don't know that, right? I think our $1.5 million is a nice to have for them, but I think they're gonna get there anyway. So if you think that maybe they get 80% of what they're showing there at 3.5, do they get 2.8 of that? Which gets them to 6.1. So our $1 million allows them to keep some of their capital. I don't know. So I'm in that. I'm in that. I don't know that I want to be more than what the county's at 750, I guess, is I think Tacoma kind of cheaped out on it too, a little bit, to be honest. I mean, that's I don't think that they, because they are probably the primary recipient of the benefits, but
Right.
So,
Okay.
better than Tacoma, at least, probably at least as good as the county. How about that?
Sounds good.
Did I talk my way through it?
I've got a
Mayor?
number in my mind that I'm sensing. Any other comments or questions or feedback? Deputy Mayor, did you have any?
Yeah,
thoughts?
thank you, Mr. Mayor. I too toured that EFN location and I was very impressed. They're the ones that's building the new warehouse, right?
That's what this is all about. Yeah.
So I'm gearing toward the 1 million.
Ms. Bell?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, so definitely in support of it. I think that because they are in Lakewood, I would like to do the 750 just because they are here, they're our own. I know that they are a regional solution. But that would be my reasoning to support them with the 750.
Okay. So my thought would be to match the counties at 750, and if they needed any more, if and only if they needed any more, we'd be the last dollars in up to $1 million. That might be the way to incentivize. Yeah, well, could be. No, that's a good point, but I probably would limit hours to 750 unless they were really struggling at the very, very end, and we wouldn't know that until the end of 2024 in order for the allocation to work. So that would be my thought. Do you guys feel good about that? It matches the county. Yep.
I just want to make sure that we're not penalizing them for being good fundraisers and having excellent relationships and pulling sources of funding together. Just want to make sure that's not what this is about.
I don't think so. You know, again, when I did I've had a couple of conversations with Michelle Douglas, have been great, and they were very appreciative at the thought of 500,000, as I remember, until we had this nice tranche of money that came, and then we were discussing the RFP. So naturally, they wanted to see if they could up the request, which is completely understandable. But I think that they would be pleased as punch at $750,000. Mr. Anderson.
I have an additional concern that it's not just about Emergency Food Network, but in general. Emergency Food Network, in my opinion, is still a charity. So many people getting ARPA, COVID funds are government contractors that happen to be nonprofits. All their money comes from the government and they're all in line. Emergency Food Network has started to veer that way a little bit. They came to the county and wanted $2 million a year in operating funds, where they've got none before. And there wasn't $2 million of additional need. It's just, you don't need to be a charity anymore. You don't need to go to the Sequoia Foundation. You don't need to have major donors. And there's going to be a COVID cliff. And there's going to be competition for that operating money. And I like to see organizations like Emergency Food Network, who are primarily privately funded, Goodwill, who's primarily privately and operationally funded. They aren't existing as government contractors. And so I don't think we're penalizing them for being good fundraisers, but I'd like to keep encouraging them to be good fundraisers so that they operate parallel to the government in providing things for people and not relying on the government to pay their way, like so many others who are going to be in a world of hurt here in about 2 years.
Well, Mr. Branstetter.
Yeah, I read the application and I sense that EFN was committed to their current business model of being a charity and on a 501c3 nonprofit, but that this request and these donations here are in support of a very specific capital project, not unlike our financial policies of don't use operating money, for a one-time need. And what they're asking to fill is a one-time need. And that's what we were looking for, because we were specifically looking for capital things to be able to go and do that. So again, I think I am okay with the 750. Again, my one concern is I'm having trouble deciding how much impact we're going to make on Lakewood as opposed to expanding a geographical footprint, because there's the increased capacity will do that. But I don't have a crystal ball about how hunger is going to play out in the realities of the current world either.
Right. Sure, Mr. Koki.
So, and I agree, we're not, by having a warehouse in Lakewood, does that have a bigger impact on the folks here? And I think that that's going to be pretty difficult to prove. I do know, because my wife's involved in food bags and whatnot, and there are a number of other groups that are involved in this stuff. There are a lot of volunteer opportunities over there. The close relationship they have with the school district and making sure that break bags get out 3 times a year. The November ones just went out. Rotary's heavily involved in making sure those bags get out. So it is an important partner. I don't know that by having a bigger warehouse, does it create more opportunities? I wouldn't even begin to guess, but I do want to get that part in there, that it does create a lot of opportunities for volunteers to work. It is compatible with the air corridor. And I would say this, once we get through the list, we may have some extra money that if we feel like we can get to the million, we can get to the million. I think if they're successful with the Congresswoman Strickland's $1.5 million request,
right?
I mean, that's going to get them
They'll
a
be,
long ways away to that, like I say, and then whatever we give gets them pretty close. I mean, I think they're very close to getting there.
Yep.
So I think we have general agreement, so maybe we'll move through the list and see if there's.
okay,
stuff
so at
the
this
end.
stage of the discussion tonight, it sounds like we're tentative consensus at 750, and then we can revisit at the end. Okay. So moving on to the next project. Nourish Pierce County, they are seeking 2 million for a $5 million project. We know the location, as indicated here. It's the one on Lakewood Drive, the Mantis Ranch. There's a promise that the cow or pig motif will stay. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. It's part of the food montage. No, I'm just kidding there because Ms. Potter's in the back there, so I have to give her a little grief. So I will open it up for discussion. This one to me is not just because I know a little bit about it, but it's unique because it's central in Lakewood and it's going to be obviously serving Lakewood people. But the other interesting piece of the opportunity is it will offer some client services in a centralized location just down from the potential of the LASA facility. So, you know, it offers some unique advantages that are for Lakewood that I think merit some good consideration. So that's my thought. I'll talk about numbers in a minute after I hear from you. Who's Mr. Brandstatter?
Okay. I think that this application is also, like the FN application, very focused on capital.
Absolutely.
And it's a capital thing. And I have visited the current location, which is at the Methodist Church, and
basement.
And I can appreciate the fact that remaining there is untenable, particularly as it is continued to increase the numbers of people that have come there. It is, you know, located in a section of the city, and it does that. But having seen the current location, I can see that it's at risk of closing. I just did, as an insurance adjuster, not be cleared to do that. It's pretty clear that the impact of this project will be very predominantly felt by Lakewood residents. It's designed there to be able to go and do that. And so I would be supportive of some funding towards this. I don't know that the Fish Nourish system has, I think the range of other funders, and they have some. They're supported with volunteers and have regular funders, but most of their funders are really focused at funding them operationally. So funding a capital project is a bit new for them. And so they need some help. I'm not sure that I'm comfortable with the city putting in 40% of the needed funding for the project. I'm more inclined to look at a percentage of more like 25% to be able to go and do that. But if we want to spend ARPA dollars that in the long term will continue to benefit the city, this is a project that does that. So, I'm more in a 1.25 million number than I am at a 2 million number.
Mr. Boki.
So Mike, thank you very much. I have not been in the basement of that place. I've been by there many times. So, so I mean, in reading the documents that have been provided, so your opinion is that's not a tenable long-term situation for Nourish?
No, I don't believe it is. It's an accident waiting to happen to a volunteer.
It's a challenging location, and I don't have all the details of the stats, but I think the service component has grown pretty steadily, if not dramatically, at that location in terms of the numbers that they serve. And it's just becoming a heck of a lot more challenging to actually staff it and serve it and have the clientele effectively come and get what they need to get from the distribution network. Any other folks? Mr. Anderson.
You know, ironically, about 20 years ago, a partner and I almost bought that building in the business that was there, except the books were cooked. Building was fine. Before it had cows on the site.
I used to enjoy renting tools.
So I'm very familiar with it. I think, and I've been involved in a couple of capital campaigns with organizations that did not have a history of raising capital, had a history of operations. And so I know how difficult that could be. What I'd like to float out there is being the lead gift as a match. And not tying it to the Mattress Ranch building, but say for capital acquisition for a suitable site, we will give $1 million as a match, and gives them a tool. If they don't raise $1 million, they're not going to come close to building this building. So it's not like it's really a match, but you condition it as a match, and you can use that as a sales tool.
So you're saying offer one.
You raise $1 million, we'll match it.
Any others thoughts on that?
But not tied to and also not tied to a particular building, because by the time they raise the money, another opportunity may arise.
But I think that
and the price may go up if you tell somebody you're gonna, if it's not tied up or the purchase and sale agreement expires, you're inviting an opportunity for the current owner to raise the price. So you shouldn't tie it to a particular building.
I think that there is a purchase agreement, either inked or almost inked on this location.
Yeah, but they expire.
True.
Yeah. I've seen that happen so many times that
Understood. Yeah. Any other thoughts or comments on the request? Ms. Farmer, Ms. Deputy Mayor?
I also, I'm liking Councilmember Brandstetter's number of 1.25. I'm also intrigued by the matching opportunity. I did want to point out that there's a footnote on page 6 or 53, kind of hard to see which exactly page it is. 55, thank you. Yes, but the difference between Nourish and EFN, and so they do different things, and so if EFN's warehouse is bigger, then they're pushing that food out to more folks who are operating in Lakewood. And so I agree that there's going to be a broader gain with the EFN just because of the regional nature, but it does benefit Lakewood, which is one of the things that appeals to me. And Nourish appeals to me as well because it's so Lakewood based. And that's one of the things that I'm interested in making sure that we're leaving a legacy here in Lakewood. So I just wanted to point that out.
Thank you. Yep, sure.
Just to piggyback on that, EFN provides food to a number of banks, but about 43% of what they provide goes to Nourish. And Nourish right now has increased its delivery requirements out to the city of Lakewood considerably since COVID. So both organizations are doing more, but just to reemphasize that Nourish is actually doing almost half of what EFN distributes.
And of the half of what EFN distributes, do we have a number on, is it 100% of their distribution on the retail side goes to Lakewood folks, or does it go beyond the city boundary, you know?
It's not 100%, and I'm sorry, I don't have the language out of what was provided to you in your packet. There is a number that was included in their application explaining the percentage that goes to particularly the qualified census tracts within the city, because they
Right.
do have considerable effort there.
Got it. So any sort of comments or concern, twofold, about this kind of facility at that location, because that could impact whether or not we want to invest there. And the second thing, maybe you know, Ms. Spear, is if there was a contingent funding as suggested by Mr. Anderson, kind of as a match, how does that impact if you know the acquisition of the property?
I do not know the answer to that question.
Okay. Any concerns about a capital fund of this nature providing those services at this particular location, or are we good with that? Because that's what it's for. That's what it's indicated to be used for.
I'm just
If you-
thinking with the new apartments going in Lhasa and Prue, that's gonna be a really busy corner. Is there gonna be room for the transportation of the traffic through that area? Just curious.
No, good question. I do believe there's a transit, Pierce Transit stop, either right adjacent to it or pretty close, or two of them there. The going around the corner, as you've suggested, there's going to be, I don't know, 240 units or so in that area. That may, of course, will have sidewalk access too at that point. So that might be of help if any of those apartments end up being low income. We don't know that yet though, do we?
I don't know the answer to that specifically, Mayor, but any project that goes through is going to have traffic analysis done and mitigation and preparation of traffic patterns.
Mr. Branstetter.
Yeah, and I would note that the location, there's already an established low-income housing of over 100 units that sits there on Lakewood Drive, kind of in behind the Lakewood Hardware across there. That is already there, and we've got so it's being located in a place with the development of two projects in the vicinity of Gravelly Lake Drive and Silicon Boulevard, or there along there. That is going to, it's an area where the density is going to significantly increase. And it's big enough that you can accommodate a lot of things. So I don't certainly have any problem with the location. The Nourish Fish system is comprised of a whole group of independently operated food banks that are then sort of centrally managed to be able to gather food together. And then, there's a fish food bank in Gig Harbor, and there's one in Sumner and one in Buckley, and they tend to be small. Many of them are cited, like the current one is, in space that a faith-based group or someone is allowing to be used as a food bank to be able to go and do this. So, as Mr. Anderson said, this is an organization that isn't used to big capital campaigns, and so they really probably are in need of a lead donor. I'm interested as whether the ARPA funds being contingent upon a match being raised is allowed under ARPA rules, or if it would impact the ability of I understand a capital project of where we say, okay, we're going to do that, and we don't just write them a check, somebody submits us an invoice for capital expenses if they've been accrued to be able to go and do. It's a little bit different of saying I've received a pledge or I've received a donation of dollars as being so I sort of want to look to whether the ARPA folks would do that, but I can see where it could be a catalyst for them to raise some other money.
I'd almost want to make it an outright gift because, and here's the question for you, Ms. Spears. So let's say that we say we're going to accept the RFP at the tune of 1.25. But if they don't raise their funds by a drop dead date, we have to have some reaction time because we got to obligate funds unused before the end of 2024, right?
That's
So
correct.
I don't know from the application process what the capital fundraising plan is, but obviously if this wasn't a go, we'd have to pull back the funds, right? Be able to obligate them before the end of the 2024 period.
Within the ARPA structure, the city council has the discretion to use these funds as you would other government revenue. So you can put a condition on time for raising funding. You can say a condition on this is a contingent gift or match, whatever the council wishes to do, you have that power to do so. The only thing, as you say, Mr. Mayor, is the drop dead date to obligate funds of 2024, end of the year.
Right. Okay, so I hear $1.25 million from some aspects. I've heard it contingent as a match as opposed to a gift. I'd be inclined to give them the impetus for the capital fundraising by calling it a gift with the contingency that if they don't raise the funds by X date, that the city has the discretion to reallocate them elsewhere. I was thinking 1.25, and you could do that and then say we'll match for the 1-to-1 for the extra above that if you want. That's up to you.
Yeah, I think that's a good plan. It's amazing to sit here and talk, but we are at the end of 2022. Right. And suddenly, I know when the ARPA money was first coming and we were talking about 2020, and then they moved it out to 2024 and we're like, oh, we got all sorts of time. But then you realize if we have to reallocate funds, that you need time to do that, and you need to know that the money's going to get spent. So, yeah, I think you're on the right track, Mayor.
Thoughts or comments by the group? So we're okay with that? Do you want to come up after conversations with the applicant about what their fundraising plan and timeline is?
I can certainly do that, yes.
Very good. So now we're going into shelter, and we have the 2 veteran shelter RFPs. Maybe it was just the one, excuse me, FOB Hope, is that correct?
There was this application and then also Tacoma Rescue Mission related to Pierce County Village.
But the Tacoma Rescue Mission one is for the village concept, correct?
It's for the village. It's not for something specifically for Veterans Emergency Shelter, and it's outside of the city.
Got it. We could certainly condition that to be of whatever we want. Okay, FOB Hope. Any thoughts here? Or I can just lead off and say not germinated sufficiently yet. Mr. Anderson.
Yes,
Correct?
I agree. Plus it's operational essentially.
Yeah.
There's really nothing permanent capital. They're going to build
No.
some sheds and bring in a propane tank.
In a place yet to be identified that we may not like.
Yeah.
Yep. Next, Tacoma Rescue Mission. So we've got 2 million for the Pierce County Village. We've got some information about funding on page 61, I believe, of our packet. It indicates the county has pledged 3.5 million of its ARPA funds to the project. Mr. Anderson, Mr. Boki may have some additional information. Mr.
Yeah.
Anderson.
Well, we haven't seen with, in the federal level, we've seen with the DSIP program and with the defense. I forget what the county or the acronym at the state is, where they've created a bucket, they set a program out, authorized, but they didn't fund it. They didn't put anything in the bucket. County's backwards on this. They've got the money, they haven't authorized. And the money is set aside, it's earmarked sitting there, and the council wants certain things to happen before it lets it go. I mean, that's really where it is. So it's not that the money isn't there. It's appropriated but not authorized.
But they've conditioned their release on all other capital funds being raised, huh?
Well, it hasn't, since it hasn't gone through the appropriation process, you don't know what the conditions are going to be. Although the zoning change is progressing. Public hearing is scheduled. It's a pretty good plan for the operational expenses going forward with a proven entity. And with respect to the veterans element of it, the 25 units has been, that is a commitment by the Veterans Administration for VASH vouchers and a set aside. And with the idea that if what the VA has said informally is if there's more need, we can find more VASH vouchers. Because it's a lot easier for them to process them at that one point and work with a known entity than spread about all over the county. And they haven't been great at processing them in the past. They're getting better. So that's kind of where that is. This is probably honestly a 2-year project to get the first phase in.
Can they get it in by then?
Yep. Yeah, it's gone to, it will be connected to sewers. It will, there's a wetlands delineation going on right now. SEPA will follow behind that. The site is 83 acres. There's 27, I believe, that's buildable. And they won't touch the water. They have to go over stream, but we'll span it. The other thing that's interesting about this is, and I put a lot of stock in this, although politically we differ in some respects. I have had the opportunity to work professionally with Michael Mira, the Tacoma late of the Tacoma Housing Authority, who is innovative and can put more complex things together better than anybody I've ever met in the industry. And he has written just a glowing endorsement of both the concept and the location, having gone and viewed it, because it's an innovative step. And I could go on, but it's a concept that delivers a lot of bang for the buck on permanent supportive housing. You'll contrast this with the request by LASA, that I'm going to be critical of later, which is $500,000 a unit. And that's before they have any cost overruns. And then they don't have anything concrete for funding the services that are supposed to go with permanent supportive housing. So what they're doing is they're building expensive housing and having people live in it, which really doesn't get to the root of the problem. Like something like this, it has a strong programmatic on-site 24/7 element to it. So
do you think that any allocation that we will authorize or may authorize can be conditioned on ensuring that X number of beds are available for Lakewood homeless individuals, either veteran or others? Yeah. I would like to see us do that.
I can tell you that Steve O'Ban, who's spearheading this for the county, has indicated informally, not in a direct question, but indicated like if if you need some set aside or something, that would probably be doable.
And I think
The
I would
thing,
like
the
to see
things
that,
that, the things that are hot buttons are things that create more cost, not, not things that are conditions on the operations.
And the reason why I throw that out there for the obvious reason that we want to get some real benefit for this one-time capital money that we've talked a lot about doing something significant for the Lakewood community. But there's also an interesting bit of ownership that is coming to pass with this project. You know, service clubs are saying, hey, we would like to sponsor a Lakewood house or Lakewood Rotary house or a Kiwanis house or, you know, whatever Lions thing. And so if we can have some set aside housing that is specifically for Lakewood folks, and let's say the number's 50 of the 250, whatever it's going to be, but maybe luckily we only have 47 or whatever, then the other 3 obviously would go toward the needs of whomever in the county that would need it. But it would be nice to have sort of a first dibs.
The
on a
first,
number
I
of
think the
housing.
first phase is supposed to be high 50s. It goes up to over to
But
closer to
ultimately,
250.
as it's
It's
built
going to be
out,
staged.
250 when it's built out.
But yeah, but
Yeah.
it would have close to 60 and some core buildings
Mhm.
in phase 1.
Yes, Mr. Branson and then Ms. Spear. Yep.
Yeah, well, you know, I think the project is an excellent regional project, and it looks like it's got funding things to be able to go and do. It isn't in Lakewood, and it's not a shelter, so it doesn't really responsive to our RFP, but so I think we may be at a point of where we need to restructure our expectations to get an RFP sponsor that's going to go to do that.
To do.
The model that was, that people are going to stay there a long time.
Right.
This isn't a transitional space to be able to go and do that. So the concept of a Lakewood bed isn't there. You know, the best you can do is say, you know, the way that they categorize the homeless is they say, well, where was your last permanent residence? And we could say, well, we want someone whose last permanent residence was Lakewood to get a certain number of them, but that becomes, I have trouble seeing that being manageable in its going forward. I guess that I certainly don't like the other application. But I guess I would still like to sort of see if we could restructure the RFP and say, we want something that will house veterans, and maybe it's not actually a shelter, but we want it in Lakewood, and maybe that becomes the use of that piece of property that we've acquired in Tillicum that doesn't look like it's going to go for what we first thought it would be. But that if we were saying, we've got a piece of property and some money and look for a proposal of someone who's going to house veterans in some way, that would be a better, we might get an RFP response to that that could be funded by 2024, and there'd be something on that piece of property serving veterans in Lakewood by 2026. So I'm not necessarily looking to, if we're looking to provide some funding to this, I think it's more an amount that's more in the range of being a token to a regional project than it is for something that really advances things in Lakewood.
I have 2 thoughts there and then I'll turn it over. I think that your request to retool an RFP is something we can think about after we get through all of these, because we're going to have some extra money set aside from the 5 million that we set aside, because right now we're only at 2. So we still have some money to maybe go back to the well on a more tooled RFP for sure on the veterans housing piece. But I think that we do need to at least give consideration on this one. They're asking for 2 million. You know, it's certainly not chump change by any means. And I want it to be more than a token because it needs to serve, you know, not only the regional needs, but certainly Lakewood needs if it's part of our allocation. I thought, did you have a question, comment, Ms. Farmer?
I wanted to remind us that we had this conversation when we started this process and we put in a section about veterans shelter and we didn't know what we were going to get. And so the fact that we got something at all, I'm impressed. So
Right.
we didn't know what capacity was out there and who was going to be able to pull something together in such a short time frame. So here we are. I think this project, the village project is a good one. But I'm with Councilmember Branstetter. I'm not entirely sure it falls under the parameters that we've set for this particular thing. I want Lakewood to support it's at some level, the village, but I don't know if we need to pull some money out and do it as just slightly different or whatever.
Mr. Anderson.
I think we've complied with ARPA. I'll leave it to the city attorney to correct me, but we've had a competitive process. And we get to be the judge of what we spend it on. I don't think we have to tool RFPs and say, you have to match X, Y, and Z, or we won't give you any money. We could set that rule. But if we say generally we want to do X and Y, and we have a competitive process and people put in applications, we say, well, that does enough of what we want. I think we can go there.
I mean, Mr. Boki, did you have a point on this?
I do, and at the risk of getting too far afield, maybe I'd like to try to define what I thought by a veterans project. I actually thought it would be like permanent supportive housing. I didn't see it as a shelter because I don't know on any given day how many veteran homeless there really are. My main concern is elderly, poor veterans who need housing in a region where housing is very expensive. Carving out, doing a carve out because we could do low income senior anything and it would be packed, right? We could build 1,000 units and fill them probably. That's what I saw, right? I saw, hey, you know, I was in the Army a long time. Never really worked much after that, you know, on and off. I've got some issues. And I need a good place to live because on my disability and Social Security, I'm only make this much. And now my rent's $2,000 a month. That's what I was looking for. I guess I never bought in to the veterans shelter. And for a number of reasons, one I already stated, I don't know that there's that many. And then you get into the deal where they honorably discharged, where they dishonorably discharged. Do we, you know, what's our hurdle? And then, well, I just never saw that as a solution for us. So I want to make that known because it seems to be getting caught in this, the Community First Village. I think the Community First Village, any of you have seen the video of the Austin facility. You come away impressed with what they do. There are certain advantages in that Austin facility that just don't present itself here in the Northwest, I don't believe. Overall, I think it's a good project. They got a lot of hurdles to cover, and this would be one if we gave any. I think there will be Lakewood people who end up in this, especially as it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. The question is how much, and then the question, I guess, is to what degree we support that with our ARPA dollars. They have a lot of hurdles to cover.
Well, I think again, we're
The
running on a
cross.
timeline situation. They've got a wonderful project that we hope gets up and running sooner than later. But we got a allocation deadline of 2024, end of year. So I'll throw it out on the table to get it started. What about $1 million for the Pierce County Village Phase 1? With a condition that they're able to get this thing up and running, or at least, enough funding to get Phase 1 going. And with some sort of set aside, if we can, for some Lakewood folks.
I could support that, and I think enough funding is going to be very easy to determine. County puts in $22 million, it's going to go.
Right.
If the county doesn't, it's not going to go.
Got it. And then that is kind of on the table for discussion, right, between county council as proposed by the executive. They're waiting to determine the conditions themselves.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Deputy Mayor, did you have
I
a
was
point?
just gonna point out that on page 117 of our packet, it says the Community First Village will have 250 micro homes to permanently house chronically homeless veterans and non-veterans.
Yeah, when it's ultimately all built out, I think that's the goal is 250 roughly when it's all built out.
That's the guesstimate is that there'd be 50 that would be veterans, but there's 25 dedicated to begin with.
So are we good with that consensus, Mr. Branstetter?
For me, $1 million seems too high.
Okay.
That what I would say is we have some money that is going to be rebated to us, ARPA money from the project over on Hosmer, of where we provided $700,000 for a bridge loan that is supposed to, most of that is supposed to be coming back to us. And, that was money that was, to me, kind of looked like a sunk cost for a regional homeless project, and I would be comfortable with whatever that rebate comes in of then returning it around into this project. To be able to go and do that. And we can take a look at, because we can also look for, in terms of trying to find a way to do that, we can look at, maybe there are some other directions that we can also go with some ARPA dollars if we just don't allocate them all like we thought we were going to allocate 5 million. So, I'd like a number smaller than 1 million.
I just note, I think Lehigh expects that money to come back for operational funding.
That would be
It's not, it didn't rebate the money to the county, had a deal with Tacoma to pay for operations. And I would call it a bait and switch, but they expect that money.
I certainly want to hear more before we get another dime. Ms. Spear.
Just to clarify a little further, on October 31st, the city did receive back the $700,000 bridge loan.
We did.
And yes, and as it's anticipated and been quoted to us to date, 326,000 is the total that Lehigh would be assessing for both the 22 and the 23 supportive services for the 12 rooms that have been reserved. Meaning out of the 700,000, 374,000 would be available for reallocation by the council.
Okay, hold on, just so I can get my little
Yeah.
beady head around the math on their incredible service. How many hundreds of thousands for 12 rooms?
It's 12 rooms and the total for both years together is 326,000.
$326,000. Let's say divided by 24 over 2
Right.
years, right? Wow, okay. Not a horrible amount of money, about $8,000 a room for 2 years.
And then in addition, in your packets, not sure of the page number, but there was just a brief discussion about some additional funds that are available based on ARPA projects that have been completed to date plus interest.
Right, coming back to us. So kind of, Ms. Branstetter, to adjust your comment about, I don't want to use the word regurgitating the ARPA funds, but they all go in the same pot. So whether we allocate a portion of that money coming back or this money going forward. It's all in the same pot. So we just have to come up with a number that council is comfortable with. And I hear something under 1 million, I hear 1 million. So any other thoughts for the good of the order, Ms. Bell?
I would be in support of 1 million on that. I don't think it should be less than that. I just don't think that it's, I mean, and then it just doesn't seem substantial enough to go any less than that.
Deputy Mayor, are you good with 1 million?
I'm good with 1 million.
A little bit like monopoly money, but it's important to do it the right way, Mr. Boki, are you okay with that? It's conditioned on it obviously going forward, and assuming that the county council approves the purse strings for the $22 million acquisition. Because that's not just acquisition, it's acquisition plus development, right? Hopefully sewer. So you're telling me our $1 million may be safe?
Yeah, I think this is the one we should monitor.
Okay. Got it. Okay, so 1 million with conditional intrigue is what I hear. Okay. We now turn to LASA. This is one, as you know, where the county, as a good partner, has pledged $3.5 million to this project. This is one in which LASA is asking us to also put in $3.5 million of our ARPA funds so they can construct 25 permanently low-income housing units. And is that the total over the 2 phases?
The 3.5 million is for phase 1, or I'm sorry, phase 3, which is the 25 units.
25
So,
units,
yeah, there'll be
Phase
additional
1 is what
construction.
we paid for several years
Correct.
ago. Phase 2 is the hygiene center. Phase 3 is the 25.
Yes.
Okay, Mr. Boki, and I have.
Thank you. So I have a point of inquiry here. So on page 61 of the packet, they have a nice presentation, and then at the end here, it's asterisked and it says, well, it's really more than. So let me do my math and see if I'm right. $11.44 million. They have lined up Pierce County at 3.5, and that's home money or whatever, ARPA money. 4.4 from the Washington State Housing Trust Fund, which gives me $3.5 million left. And then they've asked us to partner to try to get federal support and state support, but they're asking us to at the same time asking us, so then they wouldn't have to ask for any other support. We would just fill in the entire rest of the amount, right? Is that okay?
I think over the last several years, there's been an ongoing conversation through the CDBG and Home and Human Services side of the Community and Economic Development Department. But then when this ARPA opportunity came up, that submitted as well. So the Housing Trust Fund, they haven't gotten an answer yet. I believe it's expected in January, whether they get some or all of that 4.4. But yes, if you were to see all of those funds awarded to LASA, it would be more than what has been cited as the total for the project.
So what have we already given them for this project? Didn't we give them ARPA money or something for the land?
We got 500 grand through the state. That was our advocacy
Yeah.
to help.
There hasn't been ARPA money provided unless it was the home ARP, and I don't think any of those
Oh.
have been distributed yet from the city.
So what did we give them then? Already?
I don't think we gave them anything except a ton of staff time.
Oh,
I'm not aware of any funds at this point.
But didn't we make the joint request for our state legislative ask of 500,000, and that was obtained last session, I believe. wasn't
It's included in your legislative agenda for this next
it?
session.
This next session.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep, and there's also funding that's being proposed at the federal level, which also has not yet been
Got it.
requested.
Has the Housing Trust Fund money been allocated yet? Do you know?
No, I understand the award will be announced in January.
Okay. Mr. Branstetter?
This is an application that, LASA has been a active partner in activity, doing good in the community to do that. The project looks really expensive per unit. Uh,
That was the
that-
last one.
so this is a request that I'd prefer to wait on and see how some of these other requests for support, like does the money we're asking the legislature to try to approve, does the housing trust fund come through? Do some federal dollars appear so that it becomes clearer? And this is also something that maybe it's a little bit harder to tie this project to ARPA than some of the others, okay? In other words, this is just a continuation of a project that was envisioned before COVID ever happened, to be able to go and do that. And, another assistance from CDBG and home may be a part of the way to do this. But I think there's too many potential things that are necessary to do this that influence the size of the input we have to make that are unknowns right now. And I think we should not say no, but I think we should say, let's see how these other requests go, at least for another 7 or 8 months, which will get us through the federal and state cycles for these different funding.
Let me ask Ms. Spear a quick question then to Mr. Boki. So we talked about the 500,000 legislative ask. I do believe we gave them money to acquire the property the last year, right?
That could be, I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think we did.
Yeah.
But that was the 500,000 or 600,000, wasn't it, Mr. Caulfield? Right. So we are in for a penny in for a pound on this project, so to speak. Yeah. So, and I know staff has been working a lot on this particular project. If the county is throwing in this kind of money, if truly that has been allocated by the county council, do you know, Mr. Anderson? Or is that conditional?
So the county did a NOFA round, notice of funding availability. There is a sheet, and if I have time, I can find it.
Doesn't they say pledge?
And they
That means
used,
something.
there was 4 categories, so it was like ARPA. There were several different categories, and within that, they doled out money. They got 3.5 million, and I believe it was of ARPA. I think it was in the ARPA.
I think it was allocated to them.
And it has been allocated to them. So
Yeah.
they do have that in the,
Right.
what I say in the bank, so to speak.
So I throw that out there just to say, this is kind of our hometown project a little bit, and we've already put the money to acquire the property. We don't want to let it just sit there without being developed. But we want to be smart about it too. Mr. Anderson?
Well, I have to disagree with you, in for penny, in for pound. If I had my way, we'd discontinue Sound Transit today, take our hit and get rid of those taxes.
That was a lot more pennies.
We're in for a gazillion dollars. It still would be a good idea to stop. This is in my opinion, the least effective element of addressing the homelessness issue. And if you go back to the project originally, it was supposed to be transitional housing. I was against, I had to recuse myself because a member of my prior law firm, one of my partners, was representing one of the financiers. So I couldn't debate, I couldn't vote against it. But it came out exactly like I anticipated. It was about 50%, at least 50% over the normal cost of construction. It was bungled. There was all sorts of administrative costs. And then it wasn't transitional housing. Nobody moved on. People moved in and they stayed. And if you give somebody a free house, that's generally what's going to happen. The thing about the Community First Village is that the cost per person is so much less from a capital standpoint. It's less from an operational standpoint, and it provides on-site intensive services to try to address the needs of people who have all sorts of needs. Building $500,000 plus units that are new to put somebody who's homeless or nearly homeless, the HUD definition of which I still don't quite understand, or functionally homeless, to put somebody in that is a bad use of public funds. You can buy an apartment complex and do that for half the cost. You don't have to do a new one with prevailing wage, extra financing requirements, all the bureaucracy that goes with it. And then I don't see anything that says how they're going to pay for services that would truly be permanent supportive housing, except they've created a need for more funding from the government that's going to come to an end. So they're also, I'd rather have put the money into getting people off the side of the highway and in onto pallets with some sanitation than to build $500,000 units. And if you look at California where they've done this, it has not worked. Homeless population goes up, people don't transition, and the physical condition of the places generally declines. Even the San Francisco Examiner's done exposés on how bad it works. They're well-intentioned. I just, as a steward of the public funds, I can't support it, but I can support putting it off and seeing if they can convince me and get money from other places. So it's a lower cost, better argument. I could go for it. So I'm for putting it off for now.
I think historically, just to kind of dovetail on that real quick, then I'll bring it back. I think that last project was roughly 6 million for 14 units, right? Plus the client services center, which was part of it. That was over 400,000 a unit, and that was 8 years ago or so. It was a lot of money. Yep, Mr. Brokey.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Sure.
So Mike, there is a couple of things I do like about the project. It would require household income of 30 to 50% AMI. So it's a low, not very low, but low, or I don't know, they have the different categories. It's a very low income. So, I mean, it is hitting the sweet spot, I think. Set aside for 50% or less AMI with 6 set aside for 30% or less. And I do like that. I worry about the costs. I'm also wondering, the project that we helped out with a few years back had tax credits to it, which, and in this case, I'm not seeing that they didn't go out and look for the new market tax credits or whatever.
Tacoma Housing hunch of that for them, as I recall.
And
And there's a transition over time that they'll eventually own it all once the credits are paid or whatever.
And I'm wondering why that isn't in there. You know, like I kind of get the feeling that they're rushing this, like, hey, we want 3.5, just fill in the rest, give us that. And they haven't pursued these other angles. So I think an important project. So I'm a little bit torn. I just don't, I guess I just don't know how much to give them and when. I'm with Mike. I'm kind of thinking that they need to explore if tax credits are available, that they may be a year out or more really of understanding how much they're going to get from the state. What's the other availability? I mean, they do have the county lockdown, but find out the Housing Trust Fund, find out any other state money and see if those tax credits are out there, I guess.
Ms. Perry had a point for us.
Just a couple of things. First of all, this project, they are specifically not going to offer any supportive services. This is simply low-income housing, and so that additional cost will not be there over time. property management will be, but it will not be a permanent supportive housing project. The other thing I would mention is that as part of the 2023 comprehensive plan amendment docket that's in front of you right now, they do have a rezone request coming in for this 4 parcels total, I think, to help with the construction. So there's some delay in doing anything until that would to be approved anyway. And in terms of seeking, whether it's MFTE or any other tax break program, I'm not aware of any of that yet, but we may be premature at this point for those types of things.
Got it. So I'm not hearing a groundswell to throw a number out today, it sounds like on this. It sounds like we may want to have a wait and see approach. We have time a little bit. So are we of consensus to defer consideration of this one?
Yes.
Very good.
To clarify that, Mr. Mayor, would you want to hear whether they get housing trust fund money from the state, and then B, the outcome of both the federal and the state legislative asks?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Right. Yep, that sounds good. So that takes us through the last of the RFPs, which was the task for this particular item tonight, correct, Ms. Spear?
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
So to recap, we had consensus of 750 for EFN, 1.25 for Nourish, 1 million for Pierce County Village, and that's it. So that brings us to 3 million of the 5, which leaves us something north of 3, and with the reallocation of the other monies coming back, something close to 4.
Correct, plus the 1.9 roughly that you had set aside in the total amount, because if you recall, it was 5 million out of the 6.9.
Right. So it's not necessarily for conversation tonight, but it's our night. We can talk about what we want to talk about. So if there's some other thoughts out there, we can certainly come back to it and look at some other either different RFP angles on a veteran shelter, for instance, maybe using the Tillicum property as an opportunity. There may be some other opportunities there, with people who really do it right on the housing tax credit side. And there may be some, I have a couple of thoughts I'd throw out there for some ARPA funding if it qualifies. We did talk about the desire to fund a portion of capital for Lakewood Gardens. We couldn't with lodging tax for the legal reasons. We might be able with some of the ARPA monies. I throw that out there for some consideration, not tonight necessarily, but I'm planting the seed. There may be some other things. We've talked a lot about jumpstarting our investment in the urban park to get it done sooner than later. This would give us significant resources, and in my humble opinion, all of these are good projects, but something like that would have the opportunity to really favorably impact a wide variety of Lakewood residents across all age and diverse spectrums in the city to do something pretty cool in the heart of the town center. And we might have some funding to do it with this money. Mr. Boki.
And I'm going to jump on that. I think that that 1.9 million should definitely be set aside. I don't think it will even be enough to buy the land. But so I don't know what we're really looking
Some of these
at.
other monies could help with that. And plus we have the other 2 million in the biennial budget we provided for the opportunity fund.
Right. So this other, so yeah, I think the 1.9 million we should keep for some kind of park facility, ideally seed money for the downtown. I don't know that it'll come close, is the problem. We also have this other 564,000 and well, I mean, we could talk about that because I don't know if we have any ideas, and we could go back up our list and see if there's something we're interested in there on that list, or we could give it to the park too. Could set aside 2 million for the park. That would give you at least some design, some of the soft costs. I don't know what we're looking at.
Ms. Spear has a point, maybe, perhaps.
Sorry to jump in here at this point, but just, would it benefit the council to bring back to you the list of all of the applications that have been submitted to date that the council has not yet funded? Would you want to take a look at those again, or are you wanting to just continue looking forward with focus as of now?
Well, I think we held all of those in abeyance to consider these RFPs.
Yep.
Which we've now done.
Okay.
If councils of the desire to do that and bring them back, then we're gonna be spending a lot of money on operational things for good purposes, and I don't think that's what we want to do. I think we want to do something significant, one-time capital. Mr. Anderson?
I'd like to see a list of eligible internal city expenses that could be satisfied with ARPA funding, whether currently budgeted or not. It may give us the opportunity to essentially change the color of the money. If there are things we haven't budgeted for that we probably would budget for, there may be some tricks there, that we could utilize ARPA funding for to free up greater reserve for things like Vine Park property, or just cleaning it up so that it was less restricted. That's one avenue. Just because we have it doesn't mean we need to spend it right now.
Right.
I like the idea of pursuing park acquisition if anytime we can, and it maybe now's the time to look at to press on the Camp Murray boat launch. I mean, it's if there's a way we could.
I don't think they want to sell it.
Well, but it needs a lot of improvement.
Right.
That if we had a long-term interest in it, we might be able to wrangle eligibility. I mean, what should be more Lakewood than giving the public better lake access?
Got it. So to quickly recap, I hear, as we indicated on the RFPs for tonight, you've got those allocations. I have heard that we don't want to go back to the well on the prior applications for operational funding of various entities. I do hear that we want to consider what the fund balance is left after these allocations, so we have clear in our mind what's coming back, what's in the bucket. And then I think we want to hear more perhaps from our long-range opportunity planning for park acquisitions and maybe park improvements by way of the boat launch.
And just one note, you will continue to have these monies kind of trickle in over time. For instance, you've got up to that 500,000. The lion's share of that is the bridge loan that has come
Right.
back. But you will continue to have, as other projects complete, funding that doesn't get used for one reason or another. So periodically, we would be coming back to you to say, you have this much, you have this much, and we'll just figure out when it's convenient for you and when you would want to make those decisions.
Okay, so after we kind of get a recalc, if you will, of what we have remaining, we know the time frame within which we need to allocate those funds. We can have further discussions. We're not tied to year-end 2022 by any means, right?
Correct.
Okay, so with that, we can take a short break before we turn to the last item, which is the review of the Lakewood Library fiscal analysis. So let's take a brief 5-minute recess. Okay, guys, we're back on it here. Reconvene at 9:36. So we now turn to our assistant to the city manager, Michael Vargas, for a review of the Lakewood Library fiscal analysis that we asked staff to perform. Mr. Vargas.
Thank you. And good evening, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, Council members. Michael Vargas here to review the Lakewood Library System fiscal analysis, which I will be reviewing the memo included in your packet tonight, which starts on page 128. So to start off with the executive summary here, the attached fiscal analysis is for 2019 through 2023 and illustrates revenue sources generated by the Pierce County Library System in Lakewood, which includes property tax revenues levied specifically for library services and other revenue sources, and compares it to the cost of providing library services at the 2 library locations in Lakewood, which would be the main downtown library branch as well as the Tillicum Library branch. This fiscal analysis is focused solely on operating revenues and operating expenditures. Just to note that the City Council recently had a joint meeting with the PCLS Board of Trustees to go over all things new library facilities and major capital improvements. So those aspects are excluded from tonight's fiscal analysis, which is all about operations. So moving on to the next page to go over the key findings. I'd like to draw your attention to graph 1, which has the punchline for tonight, in that the 2 libraries operated by PCLS in Lakewood operate at a net operating loss every year. And we see the total revenue generated primarily through property taxes for the 2 Lakewood Library branches, with the green bars, total expenditures in light red, and the revenue minus expenditures in yellow, which has been negative. Which this means PCLS does not generate enough revenue from Lakewood to fully finance annual operating expenditures at these 2 library branches. Operating expenditures consistently exceed operating revenues, which also means that the overall library system for Pierce County is financially subsidizing the delivery of library services by PCLS in Lakewood. And so to put a finer point on it, the revenue generated specific to Lakewood and system-wide is not efficient to finance either new libraries or major capital improvements to the existing Lakewood libraries, which is the reason that PCLS will need to pursue a capital bond initiative that will need to be considered by Lakewood voters. And a final note on this graph, the reduced operating margin in 2023 takes into account that PCLS will be operating out of an interim downtown library facility, which has a much smaller footprint and thus less operating expenditures, which is primarily driven by less staff. Once PCLS identifies a new permanent library facility to operate from downtown, we expect operating expenditures to go back up to 2022 levels. So moving on to the next page, I'm looking at graph 2, which is 2019 operating expenditures and operating expenditure per capita. So to summarize this graph, in terms of efficiency, PCLS achieves a lower and more efficient operating cost per capita as a system at $57 per capita compared to the 2 libraries in Lakewood, which combined operate at $77 per capita. And this is due to PCLS's economies of scale, while the 2 Lakewood libraries have the highest operating cost per capita compared to both PCLS and the group of comparable municipal library systems, which we see Puyallup, Richland, and Longview. So all 3 of those cities operate their own city library more efficiently. So based on this fiscal analysis, it is unlikely that the city would be able to provide library services at a level equal to or greater than the services and events provided by the PCLS in a more efficient manner. The city would need to subsidize library operations from the city's general fund, which would have a negative impact on other city services, as a city library would be operated as another city department and would need to compete for funding as such. And this subsidy would only grow over time, since property taxes, which is the main source of operating revenue for a library, are limited to an annual growth of 1%, while annual operating expenditures would grow at a much higher rate, especially in today's environment. We are experiencing inflation not seen in over 40 years. In addition, the city would also need to account for additional overhead costs in areas such as, internal services departments for the city, such as finance, IT, human resources, and property management. So it is very unlikely these costs could be absorbed into city operations. So essentially, we would need to also expand our internal services departments to accommodate a city library. The city would also be responsible for new library facilities based on the outcome of the work and recommendations from the Library Advisory Committee. This includes undertaking a capital bond proposition that will require 60% voter approval. And these conclusions are not surprising, since most cities and towns in the Puget Sound region are a part of a regional library services district. That includes King County and the Snow Isle Library System, which ultimately means that a city library is the exception and not the norm for most cities. And the following information and the rest of the memo includes the library district system advantages and sort of a branch profile for the downtown library branch. This is all information provided by PCLS. It's strictly there for background purposes. Also included in your packet is the actual financial model, which sort of gets into the weeds and how the graphs were calculated, as well as personnel, FTE inventories, and information about the tax levy. But with that, that concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Vargas. Very thorough analysis. Any questions of Mr. Vargas, Mr. Boki?
Just a real quick, so I'm reading here, maybe I missed it, but I'm reading here that Lakewood, Maine Downtown Library consists of 28.8 full-time positions in 2019. So that's before they had to shut down for COVID. That they're proposing 14.6. What's out in Tillicum? Do we know how many folks are out there in Tillicum? It's a handful, right?
So looking at the personnel inventory on the table, it looks like there's 4 FTE in Tillicum. And that would be in 2019 through 2023. 4 FTE in Tillicum, which the Maine Downtown Library had that original figure.
Mr. Anderson.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Vargas. I really appreciated the thoroughness of your review and explanation. I think we owed it to our constituents to look into what the annexation would mean, and we may be able to squeeze another 10% efficiency out of it, but it's going to be a 7-figure general fund operational add that I find unacceptable, and have no idea how we could get a bond through to build a library building. So I am, however, concerned about the delivery of, or I would say the facilitating reading among especially preschool to preschool kids and young children. And if you look at Tillicum, one of our more challenged areas fiscally, it obviously doesn't make any sense from a financial standpoint to have a library there. It's $21 every time they check a book. But, some of us were at the presentation of, about Dolly Parton's Imagination Library. There are almost 200 million books that have been distributed at a cost of under $2 a book. It's one of the highest awards from the Library of Congress and any number of other organizations. I would like to explore this city having the city find a way to facilitate something like that so we can somehow get reading material into the family, to low-income families' living room. One of the things you find that's a great indicator of a lack of future success is to go into a home and find there are no books there. They'll probably have video games now, but there are no books. If we could, I think we'd go a long way to helping the people who don't have a library. If we could start the seed of reading, start those skills, start the imagination, goal setting, among dreaming among young kids. So, well, I'm unwilling to spend a couple $1 million a year to have our own library. I am willing to spend some money to see if we can reach those low-income families with reading material for their kids.
Before I toss it out to others, I'm going to jump on that real quick. I was at the presentation on the Dolly Parton Imagination Library. The woman came to Lakewood Rotary, and I'm not trying to jump ahead or whatever, but that might be a really good use of a very, very small bit of ARPA funds to fund that whole thing for a year for the families. Really, it's of an age group where they need to have the tools to get a jump start on reading. It could be a $40,000 thing to fund everybody that's in need in the Clover Park School District. We can get the information on that, but then Rotary or whomever would take it over.
I have a contact. The key is having a sponsor, a nonprofit sponsor for the long term to distribute.
Yeah, Mr. Mokin, Jim.
I think that's a good idea to pursue. There are other groups out there. I do it too. Yeah. My wife,
Mr. Banner
my
sat in on
mentioned,
that.
my
Yeah.
wife mentioned one that called the school district one time, and we actually looked it up and they were legit, but I'm asking her right now for the name, but there are groups out there that can help with
Yeah.
that.
Well, we're having a general discussion kind of on topic, but dancing around the issue of providing library services to folks who deserve them in our community. But under the auspices of the report provided by Mr. Vargas, it doesn't look like the finances of a de-annexation decision make fiscal sense, at least at this stage. Mr. Branstetter.
Yeah, I think, there's been a lot of correspondence and talk about de-annexation because of the dissatisfaction, and in my view, too much of the dissatisfaction focuses on the building as opposed to a library. I mean, going back 7-8 years, we were at a point of where we really decided that the building wasn't serving needs well. It wasn't efficient being able to go and do that. So, and I'm a bit concerned that some of the de-annexation comments that are spreading around go with them an assumption that if we de-annex from the library, that somehow the building would become the city's property. And that would not be the case. I mean, the building is going to remain the property of the library system. All the books and computers are going to remain the property of the library system. Starting our own library is not even starting from scratch. It's starting going on down. And so we need to be doing some education of our constituents of that, that we've looked at it, we have looked at it. And I certainly do concur that investing in reading, different than investing in a library, but investing in reading is beneficial from many different ways.
Right.
To be able to go and do that. And quite honestly, we've because we've annexed into the library system, we have the library system on the hook.
Right.
They can't de-annex from us. You know, so they're gonna have to put something together, and they're the professional library people and have got to figure out what, they have to come up with a way to serve us.
Right.
And one of the biggest advantages is that I can go to the Stillicum Library. I can go to stop by the library in Parkland. I can go online and I can order something to do that and have it in a place that's convenient for me to get my hands on it. So we're not, maybe that's not the traditional library that everybody would feel warm and fuzzy with, but it's not a total void. But just like when the library closed and everybody thought the city closed the library, okay, we've got an education problem that we have to address in terms of the fact that there are still library services available, that we were being supported by the rest of the county, as Mr. Vargas has pointed out. And that eventually we're going to get back into that situation. And so, library services are not totally gone, but they're not free.
Right.
And that it's not a wheel we need to reinvent as a part of a city department.
Agreed. It was a good program. We can get some information on that. Well, thank you. Unless any other questions or comments on Mr. Vargas's presentation? Again, more for another day, but we talked a lot about ARPA funds for capital. We got the property out there in Tillicum. I haven't been out there to look at that library, but as I understand that the need is what, 2,500 square feet? Not very big. We could build a whole new library on the land that we own, lease it to the library system, for that kind of money. I mean, you could, not very much money to do 2,500 square feet. Yep.
I also want to point out that we've got a brand new executive director at the library who has, true to somebody who's brand new in a position, she's done a lot of listening and she's got a big county to cover. And so she's hitting about the 6 or 7 month mark now where she's probably going to start making some decisions and doing some different things. And I think Lakewood's probably got some interesting things in store, just like the rest of the county. She's coming with some pretty big and interesting ideas. So we're certainly not going to be sitting here in status quo for the next 10 years. I don't think.
No, I think we're top of mind.
Yeah, very much top of mind.
Yeah, a lot of top of mind. Well, very good. I think that that covers what we have for the discussion items tonight. Flip side of your sheet reflects the items tentatively scheduled for the December 5, 2022 regular city council meeting. I won't read all of them, but they do include a great proclamation and recognition of Dr. Michelle Johnson, Pierce College Chancellor, who is retiring at year end. So I look forward to that. And we'll turn now to reports by the city manager. I think Mr. Caulfield will sort of reflect the additional meetings just to confirm in our calendars for the rest of this week, which there are many. So Mr. Caulfield, the floor is yours.
Well, good evening, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, council members. Just
kind of focus on the calendar for the upcoming week. Beginning tomorrow at 9 a.m., LPD will be having its 13th annual Fallen Officer Flag Changing Ceremony over at the Blue Steel Coffee Company with the memorial that's over there for the fallen four. Also beginning tomorrow will be the annual food drive over at the Lakewood Police Station, and there are other areas throughout the community where folks can donate food. In addition, beginning tomorrow and also on Wednesday is the 6th annual blood drive over at the police station, and that's going to run from 8:30 a.m. to 3:30. So if you're interested in giving blood, I know we provided you a link if you to sign up to be able to go ahead and do that. Also on Wednesday morning, from 7:30 to 9:30, we'll have our fourth quarter employee recognition event. And actually, this is the first, I think this is the first in-person one we're having in a couple of years. It'll be over at the Clover Park Technical College Rotunda. So I would invite you all to come down and attend Wednesday morning at 7:30 a.m.
I'll be there. Yeah.
Tomorrow evening, you have a joint meeting with your state legislative delegation. That'll be at 6 p.m. right here. And at this point in time, 5 of your 6 state legislators are expected to be in attendance. One representative, Representative Levitt, is serving on the House Committee on Committees, which is the group that assigns where legislators in her caucus serve on. And it's a 3-day process. It started today, tomorrow, and Wednesday. So she might be running a little late, but she does have a desire to try and be here. So just wanted to give you a courtesy heads up on that if she's not here at the beginning of the meeting. Then on Thursday, you have a joint meeting with your county council member, Janie Hitchin, and that's also at 6 p.m. And then on Sunday evening, the Gimhe City delegation will be here. They will arrive earlier that day, and there's a dinner event hosted by the Lakewood Sister Cities Association, and that's going to be at Zesty Steakhouse, which is the former Black Angus on Bridgeport. And they're actually having their grand opening on Saturday, so this will be day 2 for them. And if you haven't checked out their menu, looks pretty impressive. So if you have an interest in attending, as well as your spouse, please let the city clerk or myself know so we can pass that on to the Sister City Association. And that is at 6:30 p.m. 6:30 p.m. on Sunday.
Well, I think we're trying to get as many of us there as we can, right? Because otherwise it looks a little anemic.
Yes, so they're traveling from South Korea, so
Yeah.
yes. So, and then on Monday, the original plan was to have a Gimhe City delegation meeting with city officials here in the chambers at 3 o'clock, which would also include the signing of the memorandum of understanding between our 2 great communities. However, the plan now is that will be incorporated as part of your regular meeting next Monday. And so it'll be on the agenda right up front. And so they'll be here. What we'll try and do is set up a table to be able to do the signing of the MOU. And by the way, they'll have a party of 9 members that are going to be visiting.
You can do it down in the center, something like that.
Something like that. Yeah, we'll figure out the logistics, Mayor. The 3 is done. Yeah. Okay. And then on Tuesday, December 5th, a week from tomorrow, I'm sorry, on December 6th, a week from tomorrow, there's a farewell luncheon at 12:30 over at the Tacoma Country and Golf Club, again, sponsored by the Lakewood Sister Cities Association, and you're all invited to that as well. And if you could please let us know your RSVPs, we would appreciate that as well. And then they're going to be flying out later that evening.
Okay.
So those are the opportunities that you'll have with the Sister City visitors.
Very good.
Gimhe.
Ms. Farmer.
Clarification on Sunday, are spouses allowed? Did I hear you say?
Yes, if you'd like to.
Thank you.
Just need a head count.
Got it.
It's an interesting place to do a function because I walked in there. I don't think there's a lot of milling space. It's a lot of booze, I thought. BOOTHS, booze. Not booze. Yeah. Yeah.
it's just like, it's just a different decor, but it's pretty much the same layout
Right.
as Black Angus. Yeah,
Maybe it'll be in the bar area or something.
yeah.
Okay, well, more to follow. We'll enjoy the evening and meet some great people.
That's exactly right. I understand there's been rumors of snow, not really, but around here, it's a big deal. Don't call me unless it's over 3 inches, but, and actually in all seriousness, our crews are waiting and standing by. We got plenty of brine, we got plenty of salt, and, we got plenty of snow plows for a city of our size and scope. And so they're out there de-icing right now. And yes.
Boston, 3 inches. Is that-
Do not listen to the media. I need people getting out when there's snow, in all seriousness, when there's snow on the ground.
Right.
I need people out there driving on the roads
Right.
to get their
Melt it.
hot tires to melt the snow in the main arterial. So staying home is not helpful. So that's why I-5 is clear.
Perfect. Little street hockey. when
And
it
the
gets to
key,
be-
and the key to snow is if you have to go someplace,
Right.
leave
Go
15
someplace.
minutes earlier,
There you go.
all right? And drive to conditions. It's
This is a
that
man-
simple.
This is a man from the Northeast.
It's that simple. And just because you got 4-wheel drive, all that means is you slide on all 4. That's all that means. So that's some free advice right there.
Nice.
So with that, Mayor, that's my report.
Well, that concludes your advice, apparently. The sliding on all 4. Good. Any questions of Mr. Caulfield other than our traction tires advised? If not, we will turn to city council comments. Mr. Brandstetter, we'll start with you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I am planning to go over to the Blue Steel tomorrow morning for the commemoration of that unfortunate event, but the flag ceremony that is done there is a good reminder, and it's done by people who do it right. So I'm looking to go again, and I will attend the city recognition breakfast on Wednesday to be able to go and do that. And I'm going to go to the welcome dinner for the folks from Gimhay, and looking to be here when we sign the agreement that's going to establish some parameters for our longer term relationship on Monday, to be able to go and do that. It's a new mayor. He's not the same mayor that I visited or that we went on. So it'll be interesting to see how big of a, that's a political office in Korea. So it was a changeover of the two political parties in terms of the city leadership. So I'm interested to see exactly how the verbiage changes from what I heard when I visited them there.
Great. How big is Gimhay anyway? Do you know, Mr. Brandstetter?
It's about 320,000 people.
Good size.
Yeah, it's a port city. It's much more similar to Tacoma than to us. But on the other hand, it's also only 2 years older than us as a city. It was incorporated out of a large unincorporated district.
Interesting. Mr. Boki.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm going to try to be there at the Rotunda, 7:30, and Zesties next Sunday. I was just looking at your Dolly Parton thing, and somebody should consider it. It looks like they haven't figured out.
They've got a big national presence now.
Yeah, they figured out over 5 years, they use census information to determine the total eligible population under 5. They suggest 65%. And so by zip code, 5 years for 98499 would be $35,543. And for 98498, it would be $27,196. So and that's a book a month. That's pretty good.
Yeah,
And
that might be a great thing to do.
there has to be a sponsor
Lakewood
nonprofit.
Rotary would do it if they could get the funds. So we should think
And
about
we have the
that.
Lakewood Foundation, we could ask them for money and it's something we should consider. I think it's a good idea.
You know-
It's an intriguing idea. I don't know anything about how well it works and
Okay,
No.
do you know, maybe we can follow up.
I'll let it go. I don't have anything else of any.
Okay. It'd be a great thing to do, I think, for the community. Yeah. She is, Ms. Bell. Mhm. Yeah,
I do not know Dolly Parton, though, but thank you.
I've seen it.
I will also be at the Rotunda for the employee appreciation on Wednesday, and I'm looking forward to the GIMHAY meeting our sister city and going on Sunday. I thought it was really great discussion today, very informative. So I just wanted to point that out and thank you to the staff who presented also.
Great,
Thanks.
thank you very much. Councilmember Farmer.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I will be at the city breakfast on Wednesday morning and at the Sunday dinner as well. And I wanted to follow up on last week's discussion of the SHAPE work plan, the proposed SHAPE work plan. And you all had a chance to look at it, and we also got a peek at staff's
Right.
overview. And so if you have any, I haven't heard from anybody other than the folks who contacted me early on. So if you have any comments, I am happy to take these to the group on this Friday, the 2nd.
Yeah, I read the staff overview. I think those would be my comments to take back. It was thorough. And thank you for that, Mr. Caulfield, on that. Yep. Anything else?
That's it.
Very good. Councilmember Anderson.
I attended the Parks and Rec Advisory Board meeting on Tuesday. They went over a work plan, presentation on what the senior center folks have been doing without a senior center. It's actually pretty impressive. And talked about the building, and since then I found a little bit more out about the building. The design of the building was pretty defective, and it didn't keep the rain out of the wall, and so the south side of the building is on the verge of collapse. I mean, it's just essentially destroyed, uninhabitable.
Which
And that
was this?
wing, the gym is in good shape. It's still being used. And the place is a mess. The grant that was a potential at the federal level was, the application for that was not approved by the council. So it's $12 million short of being put in a shape where it could last for another 30 years with no immediate prospects for great improvement. So, it may be that there's some more innovative thing like chopping off the bad part, keeping the gym and building something on the other side. But who knows? That's unfortunate, to say the least. Then something else. Oh, I won't be here for the meetings on the 5th or the 12th. I'll be on vacation out of state. And for those of you who didn't grow up in Boston, if you skid, do not touch the brakes and turn into the skid. That's all.
I'm getting incredible driving advice tonight. This is good. This is good. Yeah, exactly. I've got the Combat Mini Cooper. Deputy Mayor Moss.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I too will be attending the employee recognition breakfast. And the dinner zesties on Sunday. And Thursday I will be attending the Promise Board meeting. And then on Friday, I will be attending an event at Clover Park Technical College from 11 to 3. It's collaboration for a cause. I'm not sure what it's gonna be like, but they say they have a lot of prominent, like Amazon, Boeing, and a lot of big corporations are gonna be there offering up opportunities to support small businesses. So I'm gonna go check it out. And that's all I have.
Thank you very much. So in terms of events, I will be at the City Employee Recognition event on Wednesday. Certainly I'll be here tomorrow night for the state legislative delegation meeting and then for the meeting with our county council member on Thursday. And then, of course, we've got the welcome dinner for the Gimhe delegation on Sunday. So I will RSVP to that. Go ahead and put us down for 2. I'll bring my spouse as well. And then I think you need an RSVP for the Wednesday. Is it the Thursday or the Wednesday? It's the farewell, the Tuesday, excuse me, the 6th. I think I can do that. So go ahead and put me down for 1 on that. And that is it on the calendar. I just want to echo the comments. I thought the ARPA discussion was good. I think we got to a good point with consensus on significant items. We have 1 4-letter word for the city manager. P-A-R-K. That's a 4-letter word. So I think we got some consensus on that. A POC, yeah. Yeah. And not a place to park your car when it skids in the ice. Another kind of POC. Tree lighting is coming up, so I think that is set for which day again? The 10th. Okay. Now I know it is too late this year potentially, but I've gotten a lot of clamor out in the community about why don't we ever have a Jingle Bell Dash again like we used to do? People love that in the morning. Well, I think that's because COVID kind of came and went, but I think we could. All right, well, maybe next year we can think about it. Build it up. Oh, the city will be a great sponsor. And then let's see what else we have going on. I think that's it, but that gives us a pretty packed calendar over the next 2 weeks. So unless there are any other alibis, Mr. Anderson.
I'd be remiss if I didn't have the 3rd and final episode of Fun with Flags. We got the Space Force flag. It must have been beamed down. But it needs to be cut down. But that was quick. Thank you.
Nice.
That is your city clerk. 100%.
Very good. All right. Well, with that, thank you again for your participation. Great evening. I thought good discussion, good staff input. Mr. Boki. For tomorrow night's meeting. Okay, very good. No problem. All right. Very good. And with that, we are adjourned.